Chapter 882. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign small/say net wonderful pop-up window free reading. Your Highness, can you check the previous medical cases? Wen Shiqi asked with a frown. It's still okay in the past. Although it's not convenient for me to check, I saw some of it when he was in the Imperial Hospital to recuperate. They all said that third brother isn't well. Chu Luyue was talking about the time when he and Chu Liuxin were injured and stayed in the Imperial Institute of Medicine to recuperate. During that time, he did not only recuperate but also did other things, such as secretly checking Chu Liuxin's medical records. He could not check such medical records casually. If his father knew it, he would be reprimanded again. Chu Luyue even thought that his father would not let him off easily if he found out that he had checked Chu Liuxin's medical records. It wasn't so easy to investigate in the past, but your Highness still found it. Now there's nothing you can find. Does your Highness think that Prince Chen is in good health? Wen Shiqi asked back. This was indeed what Chu Luyue was worried about. He didn't hide it from Wen Shiqi. He nodded and sighed heavily. Yuanqing, third brother seems to be in good health now. What do you think? Chu Luchen, who had just performed the wedding ceremony, looked really good. The 3 arrows that were shot at the door of the bridal sedan chair were also very stable. Except that his face and lips looked a little paler than ordinary people, Chu Luyue felt that Chu Luchen seemed to be completely fine now. If this was the case, would Chu Luchen be one of the people he had to deal with? Thinking of this, Chu Luyue frowned tightly. It was difficult for him to deal with Chu Liuzhou, not to mention Prince Cheng. Now it would be great if Chu Luchen could also be his opponent. Moreover, there was also Xiao Wanru. Such a beauty seemed to suit his taste. She was as gorgeous as a peony and as elegant as an orchid. Her every move was beautiful and suited his taste. Originally, he thought that Xiao Wanru was still young, so he was not in a hurry. He didn't expect that Xiao Wanru would be the first to get married. This feeling was very uncomfortable, as if the person he had been sure of had become a victim. If he had known this, he would not have cared too much and directly asked his father for a marriage. Prince Chen does look good, but whether he is really good or not depends on tonight. Wen Shiqi forcefully suppressed the annoyance in his heart and analyzed lightly. Chu Luyue was silent at first, and then immediately understood. He nodded and said, Yuanqing is right. It depends on tonight. He stood still and turned his gaze towards the direction of the wedding hall. At this time, the ceremony should have already been completed. But even if the ceremony was successful, so what? He was just a sickly child. Could he really do it? Thinking of this, he felt a little relieved. Even if Chu Luchen seemed to be fine, Chu Luyue always felt that it was unlikely that he had really recovered. How could a sick person who was on the verge of death recover just like that? Over the past 10 years, many imperial physicians and famous doctors from outside had been unable to do anything about Chu Liuchen's health. How could he recover at this time? He believed that Chu Luchen was at the end of his tether and was showing it in front of others. After the ceremony, Xiao Wanru was helped into the bridal chamber. A large group of people were waiting to see the bride. Chu Luchen lifted the red veil. Xiao Wanru looked up at him with her heart beating like a drum and blushed immediately. He lowered his head with a gloomy face. The bride is so beautiful. How beautiful! So beautiful! Exclamations came from all directions, and Xiao Wanru blushed more and more. She lowered her head and did not dare to look at his beautiful eyes. Just now, she saw his handsome face, which not only made her feel at ease, but also made her feel inexplicably shy. Biting her lips, she lowered her head and looked at the red carpet beneath her feet. Your Highness, if you are hungry, let her have it first. Chu Luchen smiled slightly and ordered the nanny beside him. The nanny in the palace nodded and received the madams and misses in the bridal chamber with a smile. Chu Luchen turned around and walked out. At this time, as the bridegroom, he must go out. However, he had always been in poor health, so no one dared to force him to drink at the wedding banquet. The incident at the wedding banquet of Marquis Xing's mansion had been settled, so no one dared to make any trouble. Everyone turned a blind eye to the way the bridegroom substituted tea for wine, as if what the bridegroom drank was wine. Chu Luyue and Chu Liuzhou did not drink wine either. When they came to Prince Chen's mansion before, they had been warned by the emperor that they were not allowed to drink wine this time. Prince Xian, on the other hand, drank alone and was half drunk. Before Chu Luqian came over, he was already drunk. Chu Luyue asked someone to help him down to have a rest. After walking around, Chu Luqian left with the help of a little eunuch. Everyone thought that Prince Chen looked pale and should be unable to hold on. Originally, everyone had doubts about Prince Chen's health. Seeing that he was so tired that he kept rubbing between his eyebrows and his face seemed to be getting paler, no one dared to hold him anymore. At the same time, they felt relieved. Prince Chen was indeed strong in appearance but weak in reality. He couldn't hold on in such a short time. In the bridal chamber, Xiao Wanru looked at Chu Luqian, who had just gone out not long ago, in astonishment. No matter how she looked at it, he just walked around casually. Several madams and misses, who had stayed in the bridal chamber to watch the fun, had to leave one by one because Chu Luqian returned early. Why are you so fast? Xiao Wanru looked around and asked in astonishment. I've finished my toast and I'm also drunk. Chu Luqian said lazily, and then sat down beside Xiao Wanru. He turned his face to look at Xiao Wanru with leisurely eyes. It was really speechless for a person who didn't smell of alcohol to say that he was drunk. Go and take a bath first. I'm drunk, so I'll lie down for a while. Chu Luqian waved his hand, fell on the bed, and said lazily. Xiao Wanru had felt uncomfortable and wanted to take a bath for a long time. Originally, she wanted to wait for those madams and misses to leave, but she didn't expect Chu Luqian to come so soon. Hearing his words, she immediately stood up. Yujia and Chu Lu came over to help her remove the heavy headdress on her head and then helped her to the bathroom on the side. The bathroom was very spacious, steaming hot, and there was a faint fragrance flowing out, which was very pleasant. Xiao Wanru looked at the spacious bathroom in astonishment. The pool was made of warm jade, which was extremely luxurious. There was also a soft cushion on the side of the bathtub, which was separated by half of a screen. It inexplicably made her feel nervous. Miss. Noticing her abnormality, Yujia called her in a low voice. Taking a deep breath, Xiao Wanru slowly calmed down. With a blush on her face, she took off her clothes with the help of two servant girls, slid into the pool from the jade platform on the side, and waved her hand to let the two servant girls go out. She got up early this morning, so her body was still stiff. Soaking in the warm water, she relaxed all over. Miss, I'm worried about you in there alone. Yujia walked to the door, stopped and said. I'm fine. Xiao Wanru waved her hand and motioned for Yujia to go out. For some reason, she wanted to stay alone for a while. Seeing that she insisted, Yujia could only leave and said, Miss, I'll wait for you at the door. If there's anything, just call me. Xiao Wanru nodded in response. Hearing the footsteps of the two servant girls, the room suddenly became quiet. Leaning against the side of the bathtub, she slowly closed her eyes. Everything just now was like a dream, which made her feel unreal. Previous life, this life, was the previous life a dream of this life, or was this life a continuation of the previous life? It was really a little unclear. The exquisite huaxing inexplicably flashed in front of her eyes, and she took a deep breath. That huaxing belonged to Chu Luqian. So, in the previous life, did she also know Chu Luqian because of this huaxing? Or did Chu Luqian also know her because of this huaxing? Xiao Wanru felt that she had remembered everything about others, but she couldn't remember anything about Chu Luqian. She reached out to rub her eyebrows, and more guesses in her heart. Now she was almost sure that she had known Chu Luqian in the previous life, and even the relationship between them was not shallow. But why was there only the simplest scene in her memory about Chu Luqian, and there was no scene of her getting along with him? It seemed that everything about Chu Luchen was hidden behind thick clouds. Why was it like this? Why was everything about Chu Luchen erased, while she remembered other people and things very clearly? It was very strange, so strange that it made her feel uneasy. Was that pair of eyes with hostility and despair also Chu Luchen's? Why was he like this? Her heart beat heavily, and it hurt very much, as if something had pulled some old things, but she couldn't remember it no matter how hard she tried. Her willowy eyebrows became more and more tightly knitted. Why was it like this? It was obvious that she had been reborn. Why was everything about Chu Luchen like looking at flowers in the fog? She could only rely on imagination and speculation. What had happened in the previous life, or what had she forgotten? Why did she forget everything about Chu Luchen? Those things should be very, very important. The fragmented scenes of her two lives appeared in front of her, but no matter important or unimportant, there was no figure of Chu Luchen. Moreover, many places that could be clearly connected were often broken, as if the memory about those things had been dug out by something. Why did she forget these things? Did she do something, or did Chu Luchen do something? That huasheng, that exquisite huasheng, opened another memory of Xiao Wanru, but now her memory seemed to be still in the fog. She could clearly sense it, but why did she still not understand it? She reached out to rub her eyebrows again, and suddenly heard an elegant voice in her ear. What's wrong? Is there anything bothering you? Chapter 883. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign small/say net wonderful pop-up window free reading. She opened her eyes in astonishment and met Chu Luchen's eyes. Seeing the light bathrobe on his body, Xiao Wanru blushed and involuntarily curled up in the water. Why are you here? Why didn't I come? Could it be that I'm not allowed to take a bath after you've taken a bath? Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows, and his handsome face looked even more handsome in the mist. Didn't you say that you were tired? Xiao Wanru stammered with a red face. This king is tired, but I'm not so tired that I can't even take a bath. Chu Luchen threw away his bathrobe and got into the bath. Xiao Wanru didn't even dare to look at him at this moment. She fluttered her long eyelashes and closed her eyes directly. But in the next moment, her body fell into a strong embrace. Your Highness. Xiao Wanru panicked and struggled helplessly. Don't be afraid, I'm just taking a bath. Of course, if you continue to struggle like this, I can't guarantee anything. Chu Luchen lowered his head, looked at the blushing face in his arms, and laughed. Xiao Wanru didn't dare to move at all. She was stiff in Chu Luchen's arms. Chu Luchen had hugged her like this in the past, but the two of them were separated by clothes. Now they were like this, so Xiao Wanru didn't dare to move. She could only let him hold her, and her heart was about to jump out. Xiao Wanru looked at the obedient girl in her arms. Under the turbulence of the pool, the girl's exquisite figure was still very attractive. Even though Xiao Wanru held her body tightly, she was still very attractive. Chu Luchen suddenly pushed Xiao Wanru slightly away and said seriously, "You are too close." Xiao Wanru didn't know what to say. Could he be more like a thief shouting to catch a thief? He was the one who pulled her over, but now he was complaining that she was too close. Although Chu Luchen said so, he still held Xiao Wanru in his arms. The fragrance of the girl in his arms rose with the warm mist, making people feel more and more attracted. The next moment, he kissed Xiao Wanru heavily without much pity. He held Xiao Wanru tightly with his slender fingers and made her stick more closely to him. In her 2 lives, Xiao Wanru had never been violated like this. She just struggled subconsciously and was kissed dizzy. Her nasal voice was full of Chu Luchen's breath, and then her body softened. For a long time, Xiao Wanru almost thought that she was going to die here. Finally, Chu Luchen let go of her and kissed her fiercely as if to devour her. You go over there. It's not good for 2 people to bathe together. Chu Luchen pointed in a direction. Almost at the moment when Xiao Wanru came to her senses, she immediately swam in the other direction of the bathing pool. The strong breath of a man almost made her unable to think. She only felt that her whole body had turned red and her breath had been unstable. Of course, Chu Luchen seemed to be more unstable. Even though they were in the bath, she could feel his heavy breath. Xiao Wanru blushed more and more and almost buried her whole body in the water. What do you think of this bath? After a long while, she heard Chu Liuchen's calm voice and asked with a smile through the fog. Very, very good. Xiao Wanru had not recovered from her shyness and could not respond to him normally. This king had someone specially build it for you. Chu Luchen said with a smile and leaned to one side. His eyes fell on Xiao Wanru's slender body through the fog. He almost lost his self-control, which he was proud of. Originally, he thought that he could completely deal with the scene in front of him. The corners of his mouth curved silently. If it weren't for her body, he actually didn't have to bear it at all. Xiao Wanru's whole face was still as red as boiling. She didn't dare to look in Chu Liuchen's direction and said, Thank you, Your Highness. Your Highness, have you finished bathing? Xiao Wanru bit her lip and asked again with a red face. In fact, she was more willing to put on her clothes and talk to him. There's no hurry. Let's bathe for a while. Shuozhua, if you think it's done, you can go up first. Chu Luchen said lazily and deliberately looked at Xiao Wanru and said. Xiao Wanru didn't dare to imagine what it would be like to get up naked in front of him. She shrank her body in the water again, as if this could reduce her shyness. I'll bathe again. Chu Liuchen's laughter came from the opposite side. It sounded like he was in a good mood, which was magnified by the empty bathroom. It seemed that her ears were full of his voice. Well, Your Highness, you can bathe with me. Take your time. I'm not in a hurry. Xiao Wanru actually wanted to say that she was in a hurry, but no matter how anxious and bold she was, she didn't dare to get up in front of Chu Luchen. She knew that Chu Luchen did it on purpose, but she couldn't do anything to him. This person was so bad. Your Highness, you just came back from outside. You can't bathe for too long. Xiao Wanru bit her lip and felt that it was better to save herself. Why not? I'm not in good health, and I need to bathe for more time. Chu Luchen said naturally. Your Highness is not in good health. The medical books say that you can't bathe for too long. Xiao Wanru hurriedly suggested. The current situation was too embarrassing, and she just wanted to help him out. Except for the current embarrassing situation. It's better to have no books than to believe all the books. Shuozhua, do you think it's true? Chu Luchen said with interest, and the smile on his lips became wider and wider. He looked at her through the mist, and Xiao Wanru immediately blushed again. In fact, she really wanted to get up and leave, but in the end, she didn't have the courage. Your Highness, you really can't bathe for too long. She coughed loudly and tried her best to put on a serious expression. However, her delicate, crimson face made her serious expression lose its original meaning. She looked all the more adorable. Shuozhua, you are really considerate of me. Chu Luchen said with an increasingly charming smile. Yes, she was very charming. She was no longer as elegant as Jade, but had a kind of strong beauty. Her once pale face was steamed by the water vapor, and it immediately turned into a delicate red, and her handsome face was like a peach blossom. The palm-sized face opposite her became more and more like a blooming flower. Her delicate and beautiful facial features were looming behind the mist, and she looked more like a goddess from the ninth heaven who fell into the mortal world. Chu Luchen felt that he had overestimated his self-control again, so he closed his eyes. Don't worry. You are still young, and I won't touch you. I've asked about it. It's better for a girl to have sexual intercourse after she reaches the marriageable age. Otherwise, it will be harmful to her health. He said slowly in a low voice. When Xiao Wanru heard his voice, she blushed again. I. She stammered and didn't know what to say. Chu Luchen laughed and stood up. Xiao Wanru turned around in a hurry and turned her head to the other side. Then she heard the sound of Chu Luchan coming out of the bathing pool. She breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. She couldn't get up until he left. Unexpectedly, she fell into a bathrobe. She was pulled up and fell heavily into Chu Liuchen's arms. She heard Chu Liuchen's chuckle, "Don't move. I'll take you back." Xiao Wanru didn't dare to move at once. She even reached out to pull Chu Liuchen's bathrobe in a hurry. It was also quiet outside the bathroom, and there was no one around. When she fell onto the bed, Xiao Wanru looked around the room with a blush and found that there was no one around. Everyone had already left. She breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. In both of her lives, she had always been a well-behaved girl and had never done such an outrageous thing. The gauze curtain fell, and another set of clothes was thrown in. It was her nightgown. It was very transparent outside the gauze curtain. Xiao Wanru hurriedly took off her bathrobe and put on her nightgown. Then she breathed a sigh of relief. "Done?" Chu Liuchen's gentle voice came from outside the gauze curtain. Xiao Wanru nodded subconsciously. She suddenly remembered that he couldn't see it from outside the gauze curtain, so she answered in a low voice. Chu Liuchen lifted the gauze curtain and threw the bathrobe she had just taken off onto the screen. He had also changed into his pajamas and sat at the head of the bed. He said to her naturally, "Dry my hair for me." A dry handkerchief also fell into her hand. "Doesn't your highness allow anyone to serve you?" Xiao Wanru took the handkerchief, stirred his wet hair, and asked curiously. Although her face was still as red as blood, she inexplicably felt at ease because of his previous words. From the bottom of her heart, she believed what Chu Luchan said. "I don't want anyone to serve me. I just want my princess to serve me," Chu Luchan said with a low smile in a clear and charming voice. Even though she knew that he couldn't see her, Xiao Wanru blushed. Her long eyelashes fluttered twice, and she didn't know what to say for a moment. "I also have a princess now. How can I let others be so close to me? I'll have to trouble you in the future." Chu Luchan didn't seem to need Xiao Wanru's response. He said, "Zhuozhuo and I are childhood sweethearts. Of course, it can't be compared with other people's blind marriage." He spoke as if the two of them had an affair since a long time ago. Xiao Wanru couldn't help loosening her hand that was twirling her hair. She was a little ashamed and annoyed, but she didn't know what to say. She had long known that Chu Luchan was shameless. If she continued to talk with him now, she might say something shameful later. But if she didn't go along with him, he could actually say something more shameful. "Your Highness, why did you stop in front of the bridal sedan chair just now?" Xiao Wanru blushed and felt that it was better to talk about business. "Did you sense it just now?" Chu Luchan raised his eyebrows. "Yes, but what happened?" Xiao Wanru thought of the scene just now and became curious. Sure enough, when talking about business, her words became much more natural, and she no longer felt ashamed and annoyed just now. "It's not a big deal. It's just that the bow I used to shoot the arrow broke," Chu Luchan said indifferently. How could it be possible?" Xiao Wanru said in surprise. "This kind of bow was not a good bow. How could it be broken? Moreover, this bow was not that meaningful, so it was useless to break it." "Do you think it's not a big deal?" Chu Luchan asked slowly as if he had eyes on the back of his head. "Is there a cause and effect?" Xiao Wanru thought for a moment and said softly. Suddenly, she thought of what would happen if the bow broke. She felt a chill on her back. In fact, there were disadvantages if the bow broke. Chapter 884. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign small/say net wonderful pop-up window free reading. But she was different. Xiao Yanru had once said that she was a bane. Although she beat the emperor at her own game and made him angry and ordered him to stop talking about it, this matter had been spread and many people had heard it. Perhaps everyone didn't take it seriously. But after all, this matter had been spread out, and many people had heard of it. Perhaps everyone felt that it was not a big deal. After all, at that time, he had used a little too much strength, and some inappropriate things were all pushed to him, which made the emperor angry. Who did it? Xiao Wanru stopped for a moment. When the imperial palace gave it to me, it was tampered with. I have already asked someone to send it to the emperor. Chu Luqin said lazily. They were planning to burn the fire into the palace. Did many people see it? Xiao Wanru frowned slightly and gently moved Chu Luqin's hair aside. Don't worry. No one noticed it except me. I knew there was something wrong with the bow as soon as I pulled it, so I asked someone to change it. The bow was only a little broken, not completely broken. Chu Luqin said with a smile. Hearing his words, Xiao Wanru breathed a sigh of relief. If no one noticed it, there would be no rumors. Chu Luqin was already full of troubles. If she was asked to bring more troubles, it would be more unpleasant to hear. Just now, when I bowed to my parents, why did I bow more? After this worry was solved, she thought of what had happened just now again. With the red veil over her head, she bowed one more time in the process of bowing to her parents, which made her a little flustered for a while. Fortunately, with Chu Luqin's guidance, she didn't make any mistakes. I am also one of the princes, so I bowed to my uncle. Chu Luqin said with an ambiguous look in his eyes. Xiao Wanru couldn't see his face, but she could hear his voice. There was some sarcasm in his voice. She knew that it reminded him of his family background. Originally, he was the son of the former emperor, which was the same as Commandery Prince Qing. He shouldn't be one of the emperor's sons. However, with the emperor's grace, he became the current third prince. This should make Chu Luqin very uncomfortable, right? He was originally an uncle, but he had to call himself a son. It must remind him of his identity. He didn't know whether it was the emperor's idea or the empress dowager's idea. Wasn't it constantly reminding him of his identity? Then, how should we deal with them in the future? Although Xiao Wanru knew that this matter might be a taboo for Chu Luqin, she still asked carefully and softly. She married Chu Luqin, so she had to pay attention to everything related to the royal family. She couldn't avoid it easily. She needed Chu Luqin's attitude toward everything related to the royal family, and she had to cooperate with him no matter what. There's no need for you to do anything. Just do what you want to do. Sensing that his hair was almost dry, Chu Luqin turned around and walked to the door to call someone. Yujia answered and came in. She helped Xiao Wanru sit down at the dressing table and dried her hair. The room was very quiet except for the sound of Yujia cleaning the water stains on her hair. Xiao Wanru looked at the big bed behind her through the mirror on the dresser. Chu Luqin reclined casually on the big bed, holding a book in his hand and quietly reading. Finally, Yujia dried her hair and left quietly. Sensing that the blush on her face could not subside for a while, Xiao Wanru lowered her head and fluttered her long eyelashes twice. She really felt embarrassed to go over. When she was looking at her fingers in a daze, she suddenly felt an arm around her waist. He reached out to hold her slender waist and said, "Why don't you come over and have a rest? Is there something good to see that makes my princess so absorbed?" The man's breath came over intimately, making her heat, which had subdued, rush up again. She bit her lip and got up according to his gesture. She was held tightly in Chu Luqin's arms and slowly walked into the bed. When they arrived at the bedside, Xiao Wanru hurriedly got up and went into the bed. She was supposed to sleep with the man inside and the woman outside, but she couldn't care about it now. Her heart beat faster uncontrollably, and her fingers even spasmed a little. After being reborn, her heart was much harder and steadier than in the previous life. But she didn't expect that she would still be so flustered, as if her heart was about to jump out of her chest. Especially under Chu Luqin's burning gaze, she was almost at a loss. She had never experienced such a scene in her 2 lives. The wedding in the previous life was like this. She entered Wen Shiqi's room. Wen Shiqi's room, which was not changed at all when he was ill. There was only a happiness character on the door, indicating that today was a happy day, and nothing else. When she came over, Wen Shiqi was lying on the bed, looking extremely weak. The servants in the room all took care of Wen Shiqi, and no one cared about a bride who came to the wedding. On the night of the wedding, after everyone left, she sat silently on the side, guarding Wen Shiqi, who was lying on the bed and fell asleep after taking medicine. No one cared about her identity as a newlywed, so of course, she was not in a daze now. After that, they set up a bed for her in the room so that she could take care of Wen Shiqi. Xiao Wanru was pulled heavily and fell into a broad embrace. For the first time, Xiao Wanru clearly realized that Chu Luchen looked extremely thin as if he were sick, but in fact, he was not so thin. He was still very fat. Under the thin gauze curtain, Chu Luchen held Xiao Wanru in his arms and leaned against the cushion at the head of the bed. Their breaths were intertwined, and under the cover of the bed curtain, they felt particularly intimate. Xiao Wanru didn't know what to say at this time. She leaned against Chu Liuchen's shoulder and felt that the breath of the person beside her was very strong, which was not as elegant as he was in front of others. Hearing his heavy breathing, Xiao Wanru unconsciously breathed heavily. She held the corner of her clothes tightly with her hands and felt that her palms were sweaty. Chu Luchen suddenly laughed in a low voice and said, "I really don't think it's possible." "Why not?" Xiao Wanru asked subconsciously. "I have asked several imperial physicians before, and they all said that you are not of marriageable age and can't have sex. But now I can't bear it anymore. What should I do?" Chu Luchen squinted his eyes, looked at Xiao Wanru and said. The petite girl leaned on his arm. She was very light and very soft, which stirred up the feelings in his heart. A pair of bright and beautiful eyes looked at him under the gauze curtain, becoming more and more charming. They had not seen each other for a few years, but this girl was becoming more and more like him. The corners of his lips curled up. He lifted his body and gently kissed the corner of her pink and tender lips. Then he thought for a while and didn't make waves in the end. He had never cared about any other woman, and he had never thought that he would lose his mind, let alone think that there was something wrong with his self-control. But now Chu Luchen repeatedly felt that he had overestimated himself. Xiao Wanru didn't expect that Chu Luchen would talk to her about this seriously. For a moment, she was moved and shy. She didn't know where to look. Sensing his gentle and pitiful kiss, she bit her lip and looked up at Chu Luchen at a loss. Her blank look almost made Chu Liuchen's tense heart burst. "Do you think the imperial physicians might have made a mistake?" Chu Luchen said with a serious look. Xiao Wanru hurriedly turned her head shyly. This person was really shameless. He actually asked the imperial physicians about this kind of thing, and he asked more than one imperial physician. How could he have the face to ask them? He was Prince Chen. How could he have the face to say that? "Shuozhuo, do you think the imperial physicians made a mistake?" Chu Luchen seemed to be determined to get an answer from her, so he asked again. "Your Highness." Xiao Wanru was too ashamed to answer such a question. What was going on? Not only did he embarrass himself, but he also wanted to embarrass himself. Alas, if I had known this, I could have married her later. Chu Luchen sighed and his eyes fell on her petite body. She really didn't conform to his wishes. She almost grew up according to his wishes. There was actually such a good girl in the world, and now he really married her. This made Chu Luchen, who had always been calm, have a lot of romantic thoughts in his heart. He couldn't help sighing to himself again, "Why don't you grow up quickly?" His words made Xiao Wanru unable to listen to him, and it greatly refreshed her feelings. Wasn't Prince Chen supposed to be temperamental and cold? Why did he become so childish just because of a disagreement? Was he still the future crown prince who stood on the high steps with a face full of hostility in her memory? Each sentence he said was more childish than the previous one, and each sentence made her blush. The meaning of his words did not change, and he kept dragging her to the place where she blushed. She stiffened her body and didn't dare to move. She felt that her whole body was about to burn as if she were steamed in a cage. Her body was held tightly by him, and she tried hard to push him away. Her hand fell into Chu Liuchen's big hand. "You don't want to?" Chu Luchen said in a surprised voice. The meaning in his words, together with the previous words, seemed to have a different meaning. Your Highness, loosen up a little. I'm hot. Xiao Wanru said anxiously. Such specious words were easy to be misunderstood, especially at this time. She didn't want Chu Luchen to think that she had agreed to anything. You're hot. Chu Luchen slightly loosened his hand. Xiao Wanru hurriedly turned inside and stayed away from him. Fortunately, the bed was big enough, so she didn't hit the wall. Yes. I'm hot. Xiao Wanru lowered her head and said. It happens that I'm cold. You can help me warm my feet. Chu Luchen said naturally. He didn't blush or panic when he said those words. Xiao Wanru really wanted to roll her eyes hard. Others didn't know how hot his body was just now, but she knew it clearly. Now he even had the face to say that he was cold. She couldn't help but shrink back. Fortunately, Chu Luchen didn't reach out his hand forcefully this time. Instead, he behaved himself and lay down. Then he pointed to the side and said, It's getting late. You should also lie down. Seeing that he didn't reach out his hand again, Xiao Wanru breathed a sigh of relief and lay down obediently. As long as Chu Luchen didn't reach out his hand, everything could be discussed. He also said that it was not the right time. Although she sensed that he seemed to be burning just now, she inexplicably believed his words and knew that he would be fine tonight. Glancing at his handsome face, she felt sweet and soft in her heart. Chapter 885. The air was inexplicably quiet, but it was not strange. There was a sense of tranquility and peace. Their breathing gradually calmed down. Xiao Wanru closed her eyes slightly. In fact, she wanted to sleep very much, but she couldn't. After thinking for a while, her long eyelashes fluttered twice and she opened her eyes. Your Highness, can you tell me something about the mansion? What? Chu Luchen teased with his eyes closed. Xiao Wanru hesitated for a moment, but finally said bluntly, Tell me about the mansion and the palace. Chu Liuchen's situation was special. Prince Chen's mansion was the so-called Nangong, which was similar to the East Palace. It was connected to the Imperial Palace. If one went out of the side door, he could directly go to the Imperial Palace. Such a location represented not only geographical but also psychological. After marrying into Prince Chen's mansion, she would inevitably deal with the Imperial Palace. You just need to be Prince Chen's mansion and do as you see fit. Chu Luchen said casually. Although he didn't get close to her again, he reached out to hold Xiao Wanru's soft hand and pinched it gently. His face darkened. If someone shows kindness to you, don't care. It's like this in the Imperial Palace. No one can tell whether it's a person or a ghost. His words were a little inexplicable and even abrupt, but Xiao Wanru inexplicably felt a little sad. She subconsciously reached out to hold Chu Liuchen's hand, and her eyes became soft. I'll listen to you, Your Highness. Since you'll listen to me, that's good. Chu Luchen reached out to hold Xiao Wanru in his arms and said seriously. Of course, only his face was serious. The next morning, Xiao Wanru woke up with soreness all over her body. When she opened her eyes, she didn't know where she was for a moment. She only felt that her whole body seemed to be imprisoned and couldn't move even if she wanted to. She looked up and saw Chu Liuchen's handsome face right in front of her own. He was so handsome and elegant that anyone who saw him would have to praise him as the god's favorite. With such a delicate face, coupled with his loose long hair, it was hard to tell whether he was a man or a woman. She almost suspected that he was a man in a painting who had fallen into the world. But when she thought of what he had done last night, other than not doing it to the end, he had done all kinds of shameless things. For a moment, her whole body was burning red. If it were not for last night, she would never have known that Chu Luchen, who was as handsome as an immortal, would do such a shameless thing. You're awake. Chu Luchen opened his eyes and said with a gentle smile. He kissed her on the forehead. Seeing him open his eyes, Xiao Wanru suddenly closed her watery eyes and her heart beat wildly. Sleeping again? Chu Luchen said with a smile. Looking at her slightly trembling eyelashes, he gently patted her back and said, "Then you can sleep for a while." I'm awake." Xiao Wanru hurriedly opened her eyes. They still had to go to the palace to visit the emperor and the empress dowager. How could she be so willful? What would others think of her? "Are you going to get up?" Chu Luchen smiled and looked at her, trying to pretend to be serious. "I have to." Xiao Wanru tried not to look at his handsome face with a teasing smile. "Okay, Zhuozhuo said you want to get up, so get up." Chu Luchen let go of her, got up first, and then turned back to pull her. Xiao Wanru had already sat up by herself. She bit her lip and didn't look at his hand. "What's wrong? Are you really angry?" Chu Luchen turned his handsome face to her and asked with a smile. His sanctimonious look really made Xiao Wanru gnash her teeth. He looked very refreshed, but she felt uncomfortable all over. Okay. At most, I won't do this next time, okay?" Seeing her pink little face pouting slightly and looking unhappy, Chu Luchen whispered in her ear. His words made Xiao Wanru's little face turn redder. All her memories of the wedding night were that Madame D asked someone to give her a book of fire-avoiding pictures when she got married in the last life. Her words made Xiao Wanru's little face turn redder. All her memories of her wedding night were that Madame D asked someone to give her a fire-repelling painting when she got married in the last life. His words made Xiao Wanru's little face turn redder. All her memories of the wedding night were that Madame D asked someone to give her a book of fire-avoiding pictures when she got married in the last life. This time, although Rui and Great Elder Princess personally sent a set of exquisite fire-avoiding maps and specially instructed her to obey Chu Luchen, she felt so ashamed even though they didn't really have anything to do with each other. Chu Luchen didn't have other women around him. Not only were there rumors, but Xiao Xuanzi had also repeatedly mentioned it. However, he actually knew so much. How could Xiao Wanru not be angry and annoyed? She lowered her little head and felt ashamed to see others. Seeing Xiao Wanru's sullen little face and look aggrieved and annoyed, Chu Luchen smiled and his eyes became softer. He had always been indifferent and never took anyone seriously. In the past, he didn't even care about himself, so who else could he care about? But now he clearly knew that the person in front of him was the one he cared about the most. Since he knew it clearly, he was willing to do it. His eyes were deep in the place where Xiao Wanru couldn't see. Since he had what he wanted, he would definitely protect it. No one could spy on his woman. He had always been the most protective person. "Master, have you gotten up?" Hearing the movement inside, Xiao Xuanzi asked at the door. Behind him was a group of servant girls, holding all kinds of washing things in their hands. "Come in." Chu Luchen let go of Xiao Wanru and said lightly. The door was pushed open, and a group of servant girls and eunuchs came in, followed by Yujie and Chu Lu. They went to serve Xiao Wanru first. Although Xiao Wanru couldn't get rid of the blush on her face, she looked much calmer at this moment. The servant girls helped Xiao Wanru to dress up, and none of them approached Chu Luchen. However, the two little eunuchs brought by Xiao Xuanzi skillfully dressed Chu Luchen. At first glance, it could be seen that they used to serve Chu Luchen. After washing up, Xiao Wanru was helped to sit down in front of the dressing table. Chu Lu combed her long hair. The other servant girls in Prince Chen's mansion all left, leaving only Chu Lu and Yujie. Two nannies from the palace came in and bowed to Chu Luchen, who was sitting at the head of the bed. Chu Luchen nodded. A nanny went forward to turn over the messy quilt with a smile. Xiao Wanru looked at their movements through the dressing mirror. At first, she didn't understand what they meant. But when a nanny turned over a messy white handkerchief from the bed, she immediately blushed and didn't dare to look at it in the mirror. "Your Highness." Seeing the white wedding handkerchief without a trace of blood, the nanny in the palace changed her face and said in a panic. "What's wrong? Is there a problem?" Chu Luchen raised his eyes, which were elegant and gentle. The nanny shivered with fear, hurriedly lowered her head and said, "I'm making a fuss." "You can leave." Chu Luchen waved his hand indifferently. The two nannies didn't dare to stay any longer. They carefully put the wedding handkerchief in a brocade box and then left. When they arrived at the door, they looked at each other and their faces became very ugly. Last night, Prince Chen and Princess Chen didn't consummate their marriage. The Empress Dowager would be sad if she knew it. Let's go and report to the Empress Dowager first. Let's talk about it with the Empress Dowager. Another nanny suggested. It wasn't a good idea for the two of them to just stand here. They had no choice but to return to the imperial palace through the side door of Prince Chen's mansion and went directly to the Palace of Benevolent Peace to see the Empress Dowager. Prince Chen really didn't consummate his marriage. After hearing the report from the two nannies, the Empress Dowager's eyes turned red. Was her Prince Chen really in such poor health? Didn't he say that he was going to recover soon? He was no different from ordinary people. It seems that, yes. The two nannies braced themselves and reported. You can leave. The Empress Dowager waved her hand. The two nannies breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly left. Is my Chen really not good? After the two old maids left, the Empress Dowager shed tears. She really felt sorry for her grandson. When she thought of his life experience, her heart ached so much that she couldn't describe it herself. This child was really pitiful. Empress Dowager, don't be sad. Maybe it's because His Highness has taken medicine before, so it's not convenient for him to consummate his marriage. Nanny Wei thought for a while and found a reason to comfort the Empress Dowager. He chose her himself, and the gift was also given by him. He even welcomed her in person when they got married. It can be seen that he is really satisfied with this little girl. But now, she is married but can't consummate their marriage. How pitiful my Chen is. The more the Empress Dowager thought about it, the sadder she became. Xiao Wanru and Chu Luchen were good, which was also the most important reason why the Empress Dowager wanted to grant them a marriage. As long as Chu Luchen liked it, the Empress Dowager was willing to fulfill it, let alone a woman. Since he could have a son and a daughter, at least he would have a descendant. Although Chu Luchen was much better, the Empress Dowager was still worried, for fear of seeing Chu Luchen pass out again. Empress Dowager, don't worry. Princess Chen and Prince Chen are still young. Maybe they will be better when they are older. At least this time, Prince Chen likes Princess Chen, which is already very good, and it is enough to let His Highness know that Empress Dowager loves him. Nanny Wei said again. The Empress Dowager nodded, wiped her tears with a handkerchief, and then sighed heavily, this child. I always feel that I owe him. If it weren't for, he is now. Her words were very vague, but Nanny Wei knew what she meant. She immediately comforted her, Empress Dowager, don't be sad. It's the greatest blessing that Prince Chen is in good health. You see, since the engagement for Prince Chen, His Highness has been getting better and better. He hasn't been sick for so long, and his behavior and expression are no different from ordinary people. It seems that he will only get better in the future. The late emperor had passed away, so it was useless to talk about this. The Empress Dowager's words were very pleasing to the ear. She nodded repeatedly and felt that what Nanny Wei said was very reasonable, so she stopped crying at once. After thinking for a while, she asked Nanny Wei to take out the gifts that she had prepared for the first meeting. When Princess Chen comes later, give them all to her. Empress Dowager, didn't you say that the gifts were too generous? Nanny Wei asked carefully. That was before, but now, as long as she serves Prince Chen well, she will do anything. The Empress Dowager sighed and said. Her child was in poor health, and she also felt guilty for disrespecting Rui and great elder princess's family. Yes, I know. Nanny Wei knew the Empress Dowager's mind best, so she immediately nodded and agreed. The Empress Dowager's palace of benevolent and peaceful became peaceful, but the emperor's imperial study was filled with hostility. The three princes standing in front of him didn't even dare to breathe loudly as they looked at the broken bow thrown down by the emperor. Chapter 886. In fact, there were a lot of people in the imperial study. In addition to the palace servants, there were three princes, Prince Cheng and Commandery Prince Qing. Prince Cheng was sitting, while Commandery Prince Qing stood a little further away from the three princes. At this time, they all lowered their heads and dared not to answer. "Tell me whose idea this bow belongs to," the emperor said angrily with a cold face. He slapped the imperial desk so hard that the bookshelf on the desk almost fell down. The bow was given by the emperor, but he didn't expect that the bow was so easily broken. Chu Luchen almost broke the bow in front of everyone and lost face. As long as he thought of this, the emperor was furious. "Brother, is it possible that Prince Chen used too much strength?" Prince Chen began to smooth things over. "Used too much strength? Prince Chen used too much strength?" The emperor sneered and pointed at his sons who were standing. "Any of you may have used too much strength, but it is impossible for Prince Chen." His words made them speechless. If it was someone else, they could explain it in this way. But it was Chu Luchen, who had always been a victim of illness. It was rumored that he would not have a tomorrow. Even if they dared to hide it from their conscience, they were afraid that the emperor could not bear it and would punish them. Chu Luyue raised his head and said earnestly, "Father, I don't know anything. Father, I don't know what is going on either. Someone must deliberately want to make trouble for third brother. Father, please punish him." Although Chu Liuzhou was reckless in the past, he was not stupid, so he hurriedly said, "Father, I didn't." Chu Liuxin looked a little dispirited and listless. Since what happened to Xiao Yanru, Chu Liuxin had always been in such a state. The emperor glanced at his youngest son's face and sighed silently. He had no doubt about his youngest son and also felt sorry for what happened in the imperial palace. It was also because the empress didn't control him well that Xiao Yanru had such a chance and almost hurt Chu Liuxin. The youngest son had always been a child. Now he seemed to have suddenly become an adult, but he still looked listless. "Brother, have you checked it out?" Prince Qing said. He focused on the direction of the investigation, and at the same time, implied that it had nothing to do with him. "I have. The eunuch who sent the bow is dead," the emperor said coldly. "Then it's not easy to handle." Prince Qing frowned and said, "It's certain that someone wants to hurt Prince Chen, but why? If it's just to make Prince Chen lose face, it should not be this kind of thing." The breaking of the bow and arrow was neither a big deal nor a small matter. For Chu Luchen, it was not a big deal. In fact, he was making a big deal out of it. Prince Cheng was hinting that the emperor did not have to do this. "Your Majesty, why don't I go and check?" Chu Qing finally found a chance to express his loyalty and hurriedly asked for the order. He didn't care about the size of the matter. As long as there was something to do, it meant that the emperor put him in an important position. He didn't have any clues after investigating the previous case. Now, he just wanted to find something else to investigate so that the emperor could put him in an important position. His words sounded gentle, but they hit Chu Qing's weak spot. For a moment, he blushed and didn't know how to answer. These words sounded amiable, but they stabbed at Chu Qing's weak spot. For a moment, his face flushed red, and he didn't know how to respond to these words. "Father, let me do it," Chu Luyue asked. "Prince Cheng, let me do it." If the emperor handed this matter to someone, it meant that he trusted that person. At this time, of course, he couldn't do it. "Father, I happen to be empty-handed, and my legs have already recovered. I originally wanted to serve you. Just leave this matter to me." Chu Liuzhou immediately realized this and hurriedly said. Only Chu Liuxin seemed to be a little confused. He looked at one person and then another with a blank look. He didn't know what to do and rushed forward to express his loyalty. "Someone will naturally investigate this matter, but you." The emperor narrowed his eyes with a cold face and looked at them one by one with a cold look. "Your Majesty, Prince Chen and Princess Chen are here." A eunuch sent a voice transmission outside. The emperor had ordered that if Prince Chen and Princess Chen came over, they should inform him first. The emperor calmed down and leaned back. "Let them in." The eunuch hurriedly left. After a while, Chu Luchen came in with Xiao Wanru. The two of them respectfully kowtowed to the emperor 3 times and then were helped up. One was handsome and gentle. Except for his pale face, which made the emperor not satisfied with him, the emperor was very satisfied with him. Then he turned to Xiao Wanru, who was standing beside him. Although she looked a little childish, she still looked stunning. They were indeed a pair of excellent sons and daughters-in-law. The emperor's cold face just now warmed up. After asking Durong to reward him, he asked someone to bring a chair for Chu Luchen in a friendly manner, for fear that he would be tired. Xiao Wanru stood behind Chu Luchen cleverly, lowered her head and shoulders, and glanced at the broken bough on the ground. She had an intuition that this was the one Chu Luchen had used yesterday. Her long eyelashes couldn't help fluttering twice to hide the trace of darkness in her eyes. Chen, how are you? The emperor looked Chu Luchen up and down and asked worriedly. He had thought that Chu Luchen's face had always been poor. Now, compared with Xiao Wanru's bright and pink face, he felt that Chu Luchen's face was too pale, and he was really worried. I'm fine. Thank you for worrying, uncle. Chu Luchen said with a smile and a gentle look. He glanced at the bough on the ground and his brothers standing there, and asked in surprise, Did you find anything? There is indeed something wrong with the bough, but the eunuch who sent it here is dead. The emperor said in annoyance. Uncle, in fact, there is no need to investigate it. This kind of thing is not a big deal. The reason why I sent it to the palace yesterday was that I couldn't spare time to ask about it. Chu Luchen said with a faint smile. With such a look and such words, the emperor became more distressed and angry. Chu Luchen was so sick, but there were still people who couldn't tolerate him and wanted to make him suffer. I will definitely find out about this matter. Take Princess Chen to bow to the Empress first. Your imperial grandmother is still waiting for you at the end. The Emperor said. Originally, they should meet the Emperor first, then the Empress Dowager, and then the Empress. However, the Empress Dowager wanted to talk with her grandson for a while, so she deliberately changed the order. Yes, I will. Chu Luchen stood up and nodded in response. Xiao Wanru and he bowed again, retreated to the outside of the imperial study, and then got on the palace sedan chair outside together. Originally, they had to walk to the palace to express their gratitude, but the emperor was worried about Chu Luchen's health, so he specially prepared a palace sedan chair for them. Chu Luchen, a man, didn't walk, so Xiao Wanru, a little girl, had to sit in the palace sedan chair with him. Fortunately, this palace sedan chair was a little bigger than before, so it was not too crowded for 2 people to sit in it. Of course, if Chu Luchen behaved properly, it would not be crowded for 2 people to sit in it. However, Chu Luchen was not so well behaved at the moment. As soon as he sat in it, he put Xiao Wanru on his lap and then asked to start the sedan chair. Xiao Wanru struggled twice with a blush. Seeing that she couldn't get rid of him, she simply stopped struggling. She leaned her head on Chu Luchen's chest and asked in a low voice, Will the Empress make things difficult for me? No. Chu Luchen said leisurely. Why? Xiao Wanru raised her watery eyes and looked at Chu Luchen. In her opinion, the Empress must not have good intentions for Chu Luchen. Her son wanted to be the crown prince wholeheartedly, and Chu Luchen was a great obstacle to her. Will the Empress still like you? Looking at her, a pair of beautiful eyes widened in surprise, as if he had asked a very obvious thing, but she actually did not know. A pink little mouth was slightly open, making people want to fiercely close to her. Chu Luchen never mistreated himself. He lowered his head and kissed her lips quickly and accurately. When Xiao Wanru came to her senses, she wanted to struggle. However, she remembered that they were in the palace sedan chair, and there were 2 eunuchs from the palace carrying the sedan chair. She was ashamed and annoyed at the moment, but she didn't dare to move hard. After Chu Luchen finished kissing her, he leaned over her ear and laughed happily. She couldn't help but reach out and pinch him hard. Chu Luchen groaned in pain in a low voice, and Xiao Wanru let go. Are you trying to kill your husband? Looking at her bulging little face, Chu Luchen said with a smile. Xiao Wanru couldn't help but want to hit him again. Well, it's okay. Although the Empress doesn't like you, she won't do anything to you in public. At most, she will ignore you. If she ignores you, you don't have to pay attention to her. Seeing that she was really angry, Chu Luchen stopped while he was ahead. He reminded her with a smile, anyway, she can't really like you. His words were a little roundabout, but Xiao Wanru completely understood the meaning of his words. They were originally on opposite sides, so it was impossible for them to have a good impression of each other. What they did was just superficial affection. She nodded at once, hesitated for a moment, and said, "Your Highness, what else do you want me to pay attention to?" "Nothing. Do whatever you want. If others don't give you face, you don't have to feel wronged. Now you are Princess Chen, my princess." Chu Luchen smiled slightly and said meaningfully. He meant that she would be fine with his protection. Xiao Wanru's heart softened more and more. The palace sedan chair stopped at the gate of the Empress's Fengyi Palace this time. The two of them got out of the sedan chair and went to the palace gate together. Some palace maids had already received the news and came out to welcome them. As soon as she entered the door, Xiao Wanru was shocked by the people in the Empress's palace. Although she had been here several times before, she had never seen so many beauties. Seeing the two of them come in, all the S looked over. They heard that Prince Chen welcomed them in person, so they wanted to see what kind of woman could make Prince Chen do this. Therefore, Xiao Wanru was met with a lot of scrutinizing eyes, some of which were disdainful, some of which were sarcastic, and some of which were full of admiration. It was still very stressful to bear so many gazes. Fortunately, Xiao Wanru had been prepared. She walked in with Chu Luchen gracefully, which made the S who were watching the show less playful. Chapter 887. After bowing, the Empress asked with a smile, "Since Prince Chen has married such a beautiful wife, Empress Dowager and I are relieved. I hope that you two can live a harmonious life in the future, which can be regarded as a relief to the Emperor." Her words were very kind. As an elder, the Empress's words were extremely reasonable, but Xiao Wanru heard some other meanings. She slightly pursed her lips, lowered her head shyly, and nodded slightly. At this time, as a new bride, she didn't need to speak. "Thank you, Empress," Chu Luchen said gently. Xiao Wanru shyly bowed sideways again. "I have to go to pay my respects to Imperial Grandmother, so I'll leave to the Empress." He meant that he was going to leave as soon as he arrived. The Empress's face darkened. In front of the hall full of S, she felt that she had been humiliated. "You just arrived. Why are you leaving so soon? Do you want to sit for a while?" Among the princes, Prince Chen was the first to get married. "I still want to be close to Princess Chen for a while. Could it be that Prince Chen is reluctant to part with her now?" The Empress said with a smile and glanced at Xiao Wanru's lowered face with a hint of affection. Xiao Wanru quietly took a step back to Chu Liuchen's side and leaned close to him. On this occasion and in this situation, it was inappropriate for her to say anything. Fortunately, she was a new bride now. Of course, she also believed that Chu Luchen would deal with this matter well and would not damage the reputation of Prince Chen's mansion. "I'm indeed a little reluctant to part with her. In order to let the Empress know that Imperial Grandmother sent someone here early in the morning and asked me to meet the Empress first and then go there immediately. Imperial Grandmother said that she had a big gift for me. I really can't bear to part with this big gift," Chu Luchen said unhurriedly with a very elegant smile and handsome eyes. With such a handsome face, all the S couldn't help but feel their heartbeats speed up when they saw him, and their eyes fell on Xiao Wanru with a little jealousy. Such a handsome child, who was favored by the Empress Dowager and the Emperor, could be said to be powerful and powerful. It was really a blessing for her to marry such a husband. She didn't know why Princess Chen's life was so good. She actually married such an immortal-like person. He had talent, looks, power, and even his attitude was so amiable and gentle. Such a person was like an immortal in heaven. How could Princess Chen pick up such a good person? In the past, there were rumors that Prince Chen was moody, but the rumors were not credible. Your Highness, since the Empress is so reluctant to leave you and Princess Chen, why not stay a little longer? The Empress Dowager is not in such a hurry. Because of Chu Liuchen's kindness and gentleness, some couldn't help looking up at Chu Liuchen with a charming smile and said. Xiao Wanru raised her eyes slightly and saw a bright face, which was considered outstanding among the S. It seemed that she should be a favored one, otherwise she would not have interrupted the conversation between Chu Liuchen and the Empress at this time. Empress, who is this? Chu Liuchen looked up at the woman opposite him. She was about 17 or 18 years old and was in the prime of her beauty. She was also gorgeously dressed. Seeing Chu Liuchen look up at her, she hurriedly pinched her handkerchief and looked at Chu Liuchen tenderly. But a pair of bright and beautiful eyes seemed to stare at Chu Liuchen. They were delicate, charming, and a bit seductive, which really made people's hearts flutter. This is Beauty Wu, who has just entered the palace. Beauty Wu is the most favored by the emperor among this batch of people who entered the palace. The Empress said with a dignified and decent look. Since Beauty Wu was speaking for her, she naturally pointed out Beauty Wu's identity. Others might not know Chu Liuchen's character, but the Empress did. She was afraid that Chu Liuchen would do something out of line again, which would be difficult to deal with. She was the master of the imperial harem. Once something happened, the emperor would definitely come to her. Greetings, Your Highness. Hearing the Empress's words, Beauty Wu immediately stood up and said in a charming voice. Then she slowly bowed, and her figure was even more charming. Beauty Wu was indeed good-looking, and the clothes she wore were very suitable for her figure. Her waist was tight, and her breasts were high. Coupled with her outstanding appearance, she looked at Chu Liuchen with her big watery eyes at this time, which made her look more attractive. I'm afraid that Beauty Wu's family background is not high, right? Chu Liuchen asked gently. His words were gentle, but the meaning in his words was very sharp. Beauty Wu was stunned. She didn't expect that Prince Chen, who was as gentle as jade, would say such words to her. Her family background was indeed not high. She was just the daughter of a concubine of a small official, and she came from a remote place. She didn't know much about Prince Chen, otherwise she wouldn't have stood up and said that just now. Your Highness. She said in a charming voice, with tears in her beautiful eyes and grievance. Such a beauty was the most attractive. She was tearful and aggrieved, and even a cold-hearted man would feel pity for her. Not to mention that Prince Chen was originally a gentle and elegant child. At this time, she inexplicably forgot her identity as an. She only felt that Prince Chen in front of her was more and more handsome, and the more she looked at him, the more she was attracted. The Empress's face changed, and she had a bad feeling. Your Highness, this is my uncle's. I should be respectful to her, but she looks at me in such a seductive way. She is no different from those palace maids and misses who bump into me on their own in the past, so I can't respect her. Chu Liuchen's originally gentle face suddenly became cold, and a gloomy aura covered his handsome eyebrows. His eyes were sinister and cold. The concubines, who were originally full of fantasies about him, were all shocked. Just a moment ago, it was still a sunny day, but in an instant, they had fallen into an ice cave. Moreover, his words clearly said that this Beauty Wu was not virtuous and actually wanted to seduce him. The Empress was angry and resentful. She was angry that Beauty Wu forgot herself and dared to treat Chu Liuchen like this. Those in the imperial palace who knew Chu Liuchen well didn't know that he was a cold-hearted man with a kind face. Those palace maids who bumped into him and intended to throw themselves into his arms didn't even survive. Although those misses from aristocratic families didn't lose their lives, they didn't have a good ending either. They often ran away crying after being ridiculed by him. The current situation was also very difficult to deal with. Chu Liuchen said that Beauty Wu seduced him in front of all the S, which made the Empress feel embarrassed. Your Highness, I didn't. I just. Beauty Wu came to her senses at this time, hurriedly knelt down to the Empress, and anxiously defended herself. She just spoke for the Empress, and at this time, it was inconvenient for the Empress to really push her out. Otherwise, who would stand on her side in the future? The Empress coughed in a low voice, and her face showed a gentle smile. Prince Chen, don't be angry. Beauty Wu always looks like this, and she talks like this to everyone, but it's not because of Prince Chen. It turns out that Beauty Wu talks to any man so affectionately. Your Highness, you have to find out who Beauty Wu has talked to in the past. If it's just her father and brother, it's fine, but if it's someone else. Chu Luqin sneered and stood in the main hall with his hands clasped behind his back. His eyes were cold, and anyone could see that he was angry. Of course, he meant that Beauty Wu was unclean. Your Highness. Beauty Wu sat on the ground in horror. Others only heard a word, but she really knew her own affairs as a family member. Before Beauty Wu entered the palace, she really had a past with her cousin. Although they didn't really break through the last barrier, they had done other things that should be done between them. Because her cousin loved seductive women, Beauty Wu certainly guessed in that direction. After that, in order to enter the palace to enjoy the glory and splendor, of course, she dumped her cousin and entered the palace. Your Highness, find out more, lest you ruin the reputation of the palace and humiliate my uncle. Chu Luqin said coldly. Although his voice was still lazy, his words were sharp. At this time, the Empress was also restless. She couldn't let Chu Luqin continue, so she could only grit her teeth and suppress her anger. She forced a smile and said, "Thank you for reminding me, Prince Chen. I'm afraid that Empress Dowager is anxious. Prince Chen, you'd better go first, lest Empress Dowager gets anxious." At this moment, she no longer wanted to suppress Xiao Wanru with the help of a group of S. She just wanted to send this god of plague away. With just a few words, Beauty Wu was killed here. The Empress felt indescribably aggrieved. In fact, Beauty Wu was tactful. Although she was favored by the Emperor after entering the palace, she had always been very respectful to the Empress and always stood on her side. She could be regarded as a discerning person. She could make a good impression in front of the Emperor and could be used by the Empress, so the Empress naturally took her in. However, she didn't expect that Beauty Wu would die in such a short time. With what happened today, the Emperor would definitely get the news soon. The Empress was also very sharp-eyed. Judging from Beauty Wu's usual appearance, she could tell that she was not well educated. It was very likely that she had an affair with someone before entering the palace. In fact, it didn't matter whether they found out or not. If the Emperor became suspicious, no matter how good she was, Beauty Wu would be ruined. Thank you for your understanding, Your Highness. Then I'll take the princess to see Empress Dowager now. Chu Luqin smiled slightly, relaxed his face, and bowed to the Empress. Xiao Wanru also bowed. Okay, go ahead. The Empress waved her hand gently, with the demeanor of an elder who was the mother of the world. Chu Luqin nodded with a smile and walked out with Xiao Wanru. However, after taking a few steps, he suddenly turned around, looked at Beauty Wu who was still kneeling on the ground, and reiterated to the Empress, "Your Highness, you have to find out this matter. The Imperial Palace is not a place where anyone can come in at will. What's more, it is related to my uncle. I will find out. Thank you for your concern, Prince Chen." The Empress almost squeezed out these words through gritted teeth. With the Empress's reply, Chu Luqin turned around with satisfaction and returned to his gentle and elegant appearance when he just entered the door. He left with Xiao Wanru, leaving the hall alone in silence. Chapter 888. The hall was very cold and empty. The smartass all looked at Beauty Wu, who was kneeling on the ground, with a sarcastic look. Beauty Wu, who had competed with them for favor a few days ago, was useless now. She didn't have eyes. She just wanted to look at Prince Chen, but she actually wanted to seduce him. She didn't know how beautiful Princess Chen, who was standing next to Prince Chen, was. She didn't know when it was her turn to be a demon. The rumor that Prince Chen was not interested in women had been around for a long time. Everyone took it to heart when they heard it. However, this ignorant girl dared to get close to him, especially when Prince Chen's newly married princess was beside him. How ignorant she was to do such a thing. Many S shook their heads secretly, thinking that Beauty Wu was a little stupid. Someone, take Beauty Wu to the cold palace. After Chu Luchen left, the Empress's face had been gloomy. At this time, she said coldly. Two nannies came over and pulled Beauty Wu away. Your Highness, I am innocent. Prince Chen's words have no basis at all. Please explain clearly, Your Highness. Beauty Wu shrank back, avoided the hands of the two nannies, and argued while crying. The Empress waved her hand without being moved. The two nannies pulled her again. This time, Beauty Wu couldn't avoid them and was directly dragged away. Your Highness, I am the Emperor's woman. You can't make such a rash judgment. I want to see the Emperor. I will definitely ask the Emperor for forgiveness. Beauty Wu struggled and shouted for help. However, no one paid attention to her, and the hall became quiet again. At this time, the Empress was also in the mood to entertain other S, so she waved her hand and motioned them to leave. All the S got up cleverly, said goodbye to the Empress, and then left Fengyi Palace. After everyone left, the Empress suddenly grabbed the teacup beside her and threw it to the ground. The teacup broke on the ground. Your Highness. The palace servants all knelt down in panic. A few of them happened to kneel beside the broken porcelain. Their knees were bleeding, but they didn't dare to make a sound. Your Highness, the Emperor may come again later. A trusted eunuch carefully reminded the Empress. All of you are dismissed. The Empress calmed her anger and said coldly. The palace maids did not dare to hesitate. One by one, they retreated, leaving behind a trusted eunuch. How dare an insignificant Prince Chen treat me like this? The Empress said sternly after all the palace attendants had left. There was no one else present, so she didn't need to hide her emotions. Your Highness, please quell your anger. The eunuch said. Calm my anger. I can't quell my anger. What does he think I am? He can come and go as he pleases. Why doesn't he take a look at his own status? He's nothing but an invalid. Could it be that he really thinks? The Empress was so angry that she pointed in the direction of the Palace of Benevolent Peace and cursed loudly. The eunuch hurriedly knelt down and hurriedly said, Your Highness, please be careful with your words. The panic in her voice was much sharper than usual and it immediately made the Empress sober. She took 2 deep breaths and tried to calm the breath in her heart. She really felt that she couldn't bear it. It was fine in the past, but today, in front of so many S, he actually didn't give her, the mistress of the 6 palaces, any face. The more the Empress thought about it, the angrier she got. The more she thought about it, the more she couldn't bear it. Fortunately, however, she still had some rationality. After sitting in the position of Empress for so many years, she knew that she should be more calm at this time. Rise, this Empress understands. She waved her hand at her trusted eunuch, indicating for her to stand up. She then turned her gaze in the direction of the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful. As long as that old woman didn't die, she wouldn't be able to dominate the palace. In addition, this little bastard had always been disrespectful to her, causing her to lose face several times. Your Majesty, Prince Chen has always been like this. You don't have to be angry. It's Beauty Wu's fault today. She doesn't look righteous, but she dares to seduce Prince Chen. She doesn't know who she is and who Prince Chen is. How can he be seduced by her? His trusted eunuch advised. Useless idiot. The Empress said angrily. In fact, she just wanted to keep Xiao Wanru here today and show her strength, but Beauty Wu ruined her plan. If Beauty Wu hadn't taken the initiative to stand up, this matter wouldn't have come to this. Beauty Wu deserved to die. She thought that she could turn over others after being favored by the Emperor for a few days. She didn't know what she was capable of. There had never been a lack of favored beauties in the palace, but who could really win the Emperor's heart? Did she really think that she had become a phoenix after flying up the branch? Your Majesty, don't be angry. Beauty Wu did such a thing on her own, and she did it in front of all the S. It's for the good of the emperor that you dealt with it in this way. Even if the emperor said something to you, you could explain it in this way. Besides, Prince Chen is here. Her trusted eunuch said with a smile. The empress understood the meaning of his words and slowly calmed down. But after thinking about it, she still felt a little indignant. Neither Prince Yu nor Prince Zhou got married, but the emperor was so obsessed with Prince Chen that he brought him, the third prince, to the forefront to get married. How would others think of Prince Zhou? There had always been an order of seniority. How could he mess up the rules? In fact, it was not just the matter of getting married. The emperor didn't care so much about the time of getting married. She was just afraid that after the emperor messed up the rules, the throne might also be messed up in the future. As long as she thought of this, the empress couldn't be in a good mood. Your Majesty, don't worry. The reason why Prince Chen got married the earliest is that he is in poor health. If it weren't for his poor health, it's even possible that the emperor and the empress dowager wouldn't have proposed the marriage so early. Although this kind of thing is not made clear, all the civil and military officials in the court know it clearly. The trusted eunuch said with a flattering smile. These words comforted the empress, and a faint smile appeared on her face, but it was soon hidden behind a trace of anger. Princess Chen escaped from the things that I arranged today. Your Majesty, if it doesn't work this time, there will be a next time. Since she has married Prince Chen, she will enter the palace from time to time. Since you are the elder of Prince Chen, she has to come to the palace to see you. In this way, you can know Princess Chen's whereabouts. The trusted eunuch was very good at talking and kept talking to the empress. The empress was overjoyed and nodded, thinking that it made sense. She could always have a chance to deal with Xiao Wanru. Chu Luqian was in poor health, and now he was in the court, so he didn't have much time to accompany Xiao Wanru. In fact, it didn't take much effort for her to deal with Xiao Wanru. She wanted to deal with Xiao Wanru because of Chu Luqian. However, after so many years, Chu Luqian was not only fine, but also got better. The empress wanted to deal with him, but she couldn't find any other weaknesses. Since he agreed to marry Xiao Wanru might be his only weakness. After all, for so many years, Chu Luqian didn't even have a woman by his side. No matter how charming the woman he sent to him was, in the end, she would be thrown out or even lose her life. After fighting with Chu Luqian for many years, the empress came to the conclusion that Chu Luqian was not a person who had tender feelings for women. He was very cold and ruthless. She didn't know whether Xiao Wanru was really different to Chu Luqian or he just took advantage of her. But in any case, the empress thought that it might be a breakthrough to deal with Xiao Wanru. Well, let's leave it at that for the time being. The empress nodded. She would definitely fight with Xiao Wanru, but it was very easy to deal with Princess Chen, who had not reached the marriageable age. As long as Chu Luqian was not around to protect her, she could deal with her at any time. Your Majesty, do you dislike me? Xiao Wanru sat in Chu Luqian's arms and asked as they squeezed in the palace sedan chair again. Of course. Chu Luqian said indifferently, if you don't want to see her, you don't have to. If I'm not here next time, she can go directly to see Imperial Grandmother. She doesn't dare to be presumptuous in Imperial Grandmother's place. He played with the silk ribbon around her waist with his big slender hands. Xiao Wanru wanted to bite him. She was the empress of a country. She couldn't be seen by anyone if she wanted to. Moreover, she was his elder with a noble status. If she ignored her, it would be a serious crime. That's the empress. Xiao Wanru squinted at him, pursed her lips, and said unhappily. Her face was small. At this time, her facial features looked very complicated, which made her look cute. Chu Luqian reached out to pinch her pink little face. Ah! Xiao Wanru slapped away his hand in pain, hurriedly reached out to cover her face, and said with a pair of bright watery eyes, "It hurts. I didn't use much strength. I just touched it a little." Chu Luqian saw a red handprint on Xiao Wanru's cheek and couldn't help regretting it. He really didn't feel that he had used much strength. However, this little beauty's face was as tender as tofu. Just a touch made her face turn red, which looked painful. Don't touch it. Prince, you obviously used your strength. Xiao Wanru said angrily. Her eyes seemed to be able to speak and silently accused Chu Luchen, which made Chu Liuchen's heart soften. He only felt a sweet and sour feeling filling his heart, making his eyes gentle for a moment. Okay, it's my fault. Zhuozhuo, don't be angry. Come on, let me see if it's really red. Chu Luchen said with a smile and came to pull Xiao Wanru's hand. But this time, he really didn't dare to use too much force. His little princess was like a ball of dough. A slight touch would leave a mark. Don't look. Xiao Wanru hurriedly reached out to cover her face and struggled to push his hand away. Her face was red. Chu Luchen used to be aloof, but why was he so shameless now? Was he really the crown prince she saw in her last life? Could it be that he had changed his core? Xiao Wanru was ashamed and angry when she finally pushed his hand away. She was caught off guard and let him kiss her a few more times. If she hadn't known that they were in the palace, she almost couldn't help but exclaim. However, he seemed to be enjoying it. He leaned back and smiled lazily. Do you want to know why the Empress dislikes you? Chapter 889. The Empress Dowager had been waiting for them in the palace for a long time. Hearing that they came, she hurriedly asked them to enter the palace. When they bowed to the Empress Dowager together, the Empress Dowager smiled and squinted. The two people in front of her, one was handsome and the other was extremely beautiful. No matter how she looked at them, she felt comfortable. They were really a match made in heaven. She knew her grandson best, not to mention that he was a grandson whom she doted on wholeheartedly. Although Chu Luchen looked as gentle and indifferent as usual, Empress Dowager could still see his suppressed joy from the corners of his eyes and the tips of his eyebrows. His joy was real and full of vitality. This was a real person, not the previous one who seemed to only have a facial expression and never showed his heart. In this regard, the Empress Dowager thanked Xiao Wanru from the bottom of her heart. It was also because Chu Luchen felt that Xiao Wanru was very pleasing to the eye. They were a perfect match, which made people very happy. Her worry that they didn't consummate their marriage also faded away. As long as they lived a good life and Chen was happy, it would be fine. For so many years, she had never seen Chen so happy. The Empress Dowager took the two of them to sit down beside her and smiled from ear to ear. Imperial Grandmother. Chu Luchen rubbed his forehead. Imperial Grandmother, who had always been wise and kind, was smiling from ear to ear today. I know. I'm so happy. Empress Dowager responded, and then sighed softly, Chen, you have a family now. You are an adult. You must not be willful in doing things in the future. You have to think about Imperial Grandmother and your new princess. Speaking of this, the Empress Dowager's eyes turned red. For so many years, this child had been very self-defeating and didn't take himself seriously at all. It was obvious that he didn't want to live. Fortunately, this child actually liked Rui, Anne's granddaughter, otherwise he might have lost his life. Imperial Grandmother, don't worry. I'm fine now. Although I'm a little weaker than ordinary people, it's okay. Chu Luchen comforted the Empress Dowager. That's good. My worries have been resolved. In the future, even if I die, I can rest assured. The Empress Dowager wiped her tears with a handkerchief. Among so many grandchildren, Chu Luchen was the one she cared about the most. This child was really pitiful. Imperial Grandmother, don't talk about death. Imperial Grandmother still has to live for 100 years. Chu Luchen comforted her with a smile, in the future, you still have to hold your great-grandchildren. These words made the Empress Dowager's eyes light up and she nodded repeatedly. Chen was not old, and Xiao Wanru was even younger. In fact, they were not in a hurry to consummate the marriage. Looking at the couple in front of her and thinking about how lovely their children would be in the future, the Empress Dowager couldn't help laughing again. Come, reward Princess Chen. Empress Dowager ordered. Some palace maids had already brought out the prepared gifts. Looking at the gift boxes in the hands of eunuchs and palace maids, Xiao Wanru hurriedly stood up and said, "Empress Dowager, how can there be so many? Call her imperial grandmother." The Empress Dowager took Xiao Wanru's hand and said kindly. Xiao Wanru bit her lip and then called softly, "Imperial grandmother." Good. Live a good life with Chen, in the future. If Chen, bullies you, tell me, and I will teach him a lesson for you. The Empress Dowager said with a smile. Teach Chu Luchen a lesson. Xiao Wanru subconsciously raised her eyes to look at Chu Luchen beside her, only to find that he was also looking at her with an indescribable affection in his deep eyes. She blushed and hurriedly lowered her head. In fact, when the two of them came over in a palace sedan chair just now, he bullied her. Seeing that although the two of them did not speak, there was affection in their eyes, the Empress Dowager was finally relieved. This time, Chen really married the person he wanted to marry, which was very good. He didn't have to follow the old path of his parents and finally cause his son to fall into such a situation. The Empress Dowager was very happy. She talked to them and even asked someone to invite the emperor over. As for those gifts, they were all prepared by the Empress Dowager. Of course, Xiao Wanru could only accept them shyly. She was like this, but Chu Luchen took it for granted and didn't feel ashamed at all. He even specially thanked the Empress Dowager for Xiao Wanru, which made the Empress Dowager involuntarily scold him for being cheeky and rebuke him with a smile. The atmosphere in the palace of Benevolent and Peaceful was harmonious. The emperor came very quickly. After arriving at the palace of Benevolent and Peaceful, he chatted with the Empress Dowager for a while and then ordered lunch. After lunch, the emperor took Chu Luchen to the imperial study to do something. The Empress Dowager was tired, so she went to have a rest first. Xiao Wanru also took a short nap in the side hall and then got up. Seeing that it was still early and the Empress Dowager was still taking a nap, Xiao Wanru went out of the palace with Yujie. It was already spring, and it was a good time to enjoy the scenery. Many flowers suddenly bloomed overnight, even in Duke Xing's mansion, let alone in the imperial palace. They walked out along the road of the palace of Benevolent and Peaceful casually. At first, they took the main road, and then they took some more remote roads. The flowers growing on the main road were not as beautiful and colorful as those growing on the small road. After all, the main road was prepared for walking. If some exotic flowers grew in the middle of the road with people coming and going, they would be easily destroyed. It was easier to raise the flowers on the side, and it didn't hinder others from enjoying the scenery. Xiao Wanru was not familiar with the palace of Benevolent and Peaceful in her last life, and it was located in a different direction from the Chuxiu Palace. Xiao Wanru also knew nothing about this area, so she just walked along the scenery casually. The master and the servant walked farther and farther away from the palace of Benevolent and Peaceful. "Princess, the peonies are so beautiful. Why are there so many varieties?" They now entered a place, which was actually a garden dedicated to planting peonies. There were all kinds of peonies planted in it, which were so beautiful that Yujie was also dazzled. The precious peonies that couldn't be seen outside were in full bloom, which was extremely beautiful. Xiao Wanru lowered her body, looked at a peony, and said softly, "It was written on the gate of the courtyard just now. It should be full of peonies." Everyone liked beautiful flowers, including her, so she couldn't help but take another look at them. "Princess, let me pick one for you and wear it. It will look better when you wear it." Yujie rolled her eyes and said. Her master was more beautiful than a flower. If she wore this flower, she would definitely bring out the best in it. This is the imperial palace. Xiao Wanru glared at the lawless servant girl. "I know, so I will wear it here for a while. After wearing it, we won't wear it out, so no one will know." Yujie really liked the peonies here. Moreover, she always felt that her princess would look better if she wore a peony. The flowers in this palace can't be picked casually. They must be picked. "I know, Yujie suddenly felt that it was right. The person who answered was not her master. She looked up in astonishment and saw a beautiful and dazzling face opposite her. She was stunned for a moment. There was someone here. Xiao Wanru also raised her head and looked at the three people opposite her, or one master and two servants. There was a palace maid, a eunuch, and a beautiful noble lady. The lady should be in her 20s or 30s. She couldn't see her face clearly, but her outstanding appearance amazed Xiao Wanru. Time seemed to be very kind to her and didn't leave any trace on her face. She looked at Xiao Wanru with her beautiful eyes and a very gentle and kind smile on her face. In terms of momentum, she was definitely not an ordinary person. Xiao Wanru took a few steps back and hurriedly saluted. "I'm afraid that I've disturbed your highness by accident. Please forgive me." Even if she didn't know her identity, judging from her appearance and behavior, she must be a concubine in the palace. However, this concubine was so beautiful that Xiao Wanru couldn't think of any other concubine in the palace who was so outstanding. Among the beauties she had seen, Xiao Yanru was the most outstanding one, but the one in front of her was even taller than Xiao Yanru. Even because she was a little older, she was more elegant and feminine. She was very beautiful, elegant, and imposing. Such a woman was destined to be extraordinary. However, after thinking about all the famous concubines in her mind, she didn't think that she was one of them. "Are you Princess Chen?" The palace maid looked Xiao Wanru up and down and asked with a smile. She turned around from a cluster of peonies on one side, and the two palace maids hurriedly followed her. "Yes, I don't know which concubine she is from." When she got close, Xiao Wanru hurriedly saluted, but still looked at the concubine in front of her curiously. No matter how she thought about it, she just couldn't figure it out. There seemed to be no such outstanding concubine in her previous life. Her eyes suddenly fell on the clothes she was wearing, and she suddenly narrowed her eyes. Didn't it say that people in the palace couldn't use things made of colorful yarn at will? If she was not mistaken, the clothes in front of her should be made of rainbow muslin. Once the emperor said that he didn't like it, it was destined that these couldn't wantonly use the rainbow muslin to make clothes. At most, they could secretly make some small things like mosquito nets and sachets. How could they openly make such large clothes? Wearing them like this, weren't they afraid of the emperor's anger? It was really strange. I seldom come out and live alone in the quiet palace. I didn't expect to see Princess Chen when I walked around casually today. The concubine said softly. She also looked Xiao Wanru up and down, and the smile on her face became more and more gentle. She pointed to a small pavilion in the peonies and said, "Shall we go over and have a seat? I happened to be here to enjoy the flowers just now, so I prepared some tea." "Thank you, Your Highness. Sorry to disturb you." Xiao Wanru was a little embarrassed. The concubine had even prepared tea early. It could be seen that she had wanted to enjoy the flowers quietly, but she had disturbed her. "It doesn't matter. It's very lonely when I sit alone." The concubine said with a smile, turned around and went to the pavilion, with Xiao Wanru following her. The two of them entered the pavilion one after the other. The concubine waved her hand, and the two palace maids retreated to the outside of the pavilion. Xiao Wanru hesitated for a moment and also waved her hand. Yujia also retreated to the entrance of the pavilion with the two palace maids. Chapter 890. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign /say net wonderful pop-up window free reading. On the stone table in the pavilion, tea and snacks had been prepared, and there was a small stove on the side with water boiling on it. On one side of the pavilion, facing the wind, there was a light blue veil hanging down. The two of them sat down, facing the sun, blocking the wind behind them, facing the scenery of blooming peonies. No matter how they looked at it, it made them feel comfortable. It was indeed a good place to admire the flowers and scenery. No wonder it had been occupied so early. "Sit down first." They smiled slightly and reached out to lead Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru nodded, didn't stand on ceremony, and sat down gracefully. They raised the teapot beside her hand and poured a cup for Xiao Wanru. Then she said with a smile, "Have a taste of my tea." Xiao Wanru reached out to take it and took a sip. A trace of surprise flashed across her eyes. In fact, she didn't know what this tea was, but she had tasted it once at the Empress Dowager's place just now. The taste was particularly light and mellow. How could she forget it? Your tea is really good, Your Highness. Xiao Wanru put it down and said calmly. Since Princess Chen likes it, I have some more. I'll give some to you later. The said with an obvious kindness with a smile. However, this kindness was indeed inexplicable for Xiao Wanru. The tea used by the Empress Dowager would not be ordinary tea. The in front of her actually offered to give her some. She was too generous. Xiao Wanru's long eyelashes fluttered twice to hide the trace of darkness at the bottom of her eyes. She shook her head with a smile and said, I don't dare to accept your gift. You are an elder, and I am just a junior. Since the deserved the title of, she was naturally the emperor's servant and Xiao Wanru's elder. Since it is an elder's gift, you can accept it. Did Princess Chen not accept the Empress Dowager's gift? The seemed not to hear Xiao Wanru's refusal and still said with a smile. The Empress Dowager's identity was unique in the palace. However, the in front of her didn't talk about the Empress Dowager, but talked about the Empress Dowager, who was one level higher than the Empress Dowager. Xiao Wanru became more and more curious about the identity of the. Is this a greeting gift from Her Highness? Xiao Wanru tilted her head slightly, which made her look more playful, cute, and approachable. Actually, that's not it. My meeting gift is this. Seeing that Xiao Wanru was easy to talk to and had a gentle attitude, the smiled even more. She reached out to take out a small ornamental box from her wide long sleeve and pushed it in front of Xiao Wanru. Today is the first time for Princess Chen to come to the palace to meet her relatives. I happened to be busy just now, so I didn't come over. Take this as my compensation. With that, she pushed the small ornamental box in front of Xiao Wanru. She actually prepared a gift. Could it be that she really missed the event in front of the Empress? The curiosity in Xiao Wanru's eyes became more and more intense. She didn't reach out to take the jewelry box handed to her. Instead, she looked at with burning eyes and scrutinized her. She was very confused. Why is Your Highness giving me a greeting gift? I don't even know who Your Highness is, so how could I dare to accept Your Highness's greeting gift? Xiao Wanru said. Seeing that Xiao Wanru didn't accept the gift, the sighed softly, raised her head, and looked into the distance with a little disappointment and sadness in her eyes. It has been too long. I'm afraid that the palace has long forgotten about it. I have to tell you. Your Highness, please go ahead. Xiao Wanru said softly. Have you heard of Concubine Lan, Princess Chen? They didn't answer for a long time and said slowly after a long while. Concubine Lan. Xiao Wanru suddenly felt as if her head had been hit by someone, and some deep memories suddenly rushed out. Concubine Lan, who used to be the most favored concubine in the imperial harem. Xiao Yenru had heard of Concubine Lan before. So what if she was the most favored concubine in the imperial harem? In the end, she still ended up being imprisoned. In this life, she thought of Concubine Lan because Chu Luchen mentioned Xiao Yenru. At that time, Xiao Yenru always liked to go to Concubine Lan when she entered the imperial palace. The one in front of her was the Concubine Lan that she had heard of in her previous life and this life. Do you know me, Princess Chen? Concubine Lan looked at Xiao Wanru with a smile. Her eyes were extremely beautiful. Xiao Wanru shook her head at first, and then nodded. After that, she restrained her surprise and said, Your Highness, I have indeed heard of you, but I don't know you. What do you mean? Concubine Lan seemed to be interested. She picked up the teacup at hand, took a sip, and asked softly. I heard that. Your Highness, aren't you grounded? Xiao Wanru said. She looked Concubine Lan up and down and couldn't help praising her again. No wonder it was said that Concubine Lan used to be the most favored concubine in the imperial harem. It seemed that she was the most favored concubine in the imperial harem. However, Why was she grounded and not allowed to go in and out at will? Moreover, she specially sent guards to guard her. Did Prince Chin say that? Concubine Lan raised her eyes and asked softly. She still looked elegant, but there seemed to be something inexplicably in her eyes that Xiao Wanru couldn't see through. No, Prince Chin didn't say that. I heard someone mention it by chance when I entered the imperial palace. Xiao Wanru shook her head and said, could it be fake? In fact, it's not fake, but there's another reason. Concubine Lan said with a smile and slowly lowered her head with a trace of sadness in her eyes. Concubine Lan was obviously in with a story. Well, let's not talk about it. The past will only make us sad. Concubine Lan said. She reached out and pushed the ornamental box in front of Xiao Wanru with an increasingly amiable look. This is my gift for our first meeting. Please accept it, Prince Chen. It's not a good thing. It's just a casual ornament. After saying that, she stood up and said, I've been out for a long time. If I don't go back soon, I'm afraid that I'll be discovered. Your Highness, are you going back? Xiao Wanru couldn't help standing up. I'm leaving. Concubine Lan turned around with a deep look in her eyes. Although she was still smiling, her smile looked inexplicably sad. I rarely have a chance to come out now. Even if I come out, it's not convenient for me to meet too many people. After you go back, don't mention it to the Empress Dowager. Did she mean that she came out secretly? Looking at all the decorations in the pavilion, they were all carefully arranged, but now they were casually thrown here. Concubine Lan was indeed worthy of being a favorite concubine. Even at this time, she didn't look embarrassed at all. If she hadn't said it herself, Xiao Wanru really wouldn't have thought that she was just a past favorite concubine. Goodbye, Your Highness. Xiao Wanru said softly. Concubine Lan smiled slightly and seemed to want to leave. However, she suddenly turned around and walked back before she reached the entrance of the pavilion. Xiao Wanru looked at Concubine Lan holding her hand in astonishment. She looked at her and wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. The calmness at the corners of her eyes seemed to disappear in the moment she turned around. Her beautiful eyes were full of excitement and unspeakable sadness. Your Highness, the palace maid outside the pavilion suddenly said loudly. Concubine Lan's slightly trembling lips stiffened in this call. Your Highness, you can go back now. The palace maid suddenly came in a hurry and reached out to help Concubine Lan. Concubine Lan, who was so excited that she seemed to want to say something just now, immediately put down her hand weakly and tried to smile at Xiao Wanru, as if she wanted to give her a kind smile. Unexpectedly, a tear fell from the corner of her eye. Your Highness. Another eunuch also entered the pavilion in a hurry. Xiao Wanru took a few steps back and made way for them. Your Highness, it's time for us to go back. The eunuch said in a low voice, reached out to hold the other side of Concubine Lan, and said softly and gently. Your Highness, if we don't go back now, we will be discovered. At that time, the palace maid's voice was also very soft, with a hint of nervousness that Xiao Wanru could hear clearly. Were these two palace maids stopping Concubine Lan from doing something? Xiao Wanru slowly narrowed her watery eyes. Concubine Lan was very strange. Not only Concubine Lan was strange, but also the two palace maids beside her were strange. Let's go. After a long while, Concubine Lan's voice calmed down. The two palace maids helped her turn around and leave without saying a word to Xiao Wanru. Seeing them leave, Yujia came in and said, Miss, was Concubine Lan so excited that she wanted to do something just now? Although she was standing outside the pavilion, she had been paying attention to what was going on in the pavilion. Of course, she had heard what Concubine Lan had said before. When Concubine Lan suddenly turned around excitedly just now, she was also shocked and thought that Concubine Lan wanted to do something to Xiao Wanru. Concubine Lan is very strange. Xiao Wanru didn't know why she would describe such a beautiful woman in this way. Concubine Lan was very beautiful. Even though she was old, no other women in the imperial palace could compare with her. Not only was she beautiful, but she also had a kind of precipitation of time. Her beauty made time even more confusing, making people feel at ease at first glance. Xiao Wanru had seen and drawn many beauties in her last life, but none of them could compare with concubine Lan. Such a woman was destined to be extraordinary in the imperial palace, but now she only had the title of concubine Lan, so most people in the imperial palace didn't know her. It was the case in her last life, and it was the same in this life. "Miss, why do you wear a veil in the imperial palace?" Yu Jie suddenly said. Xiao Wanru raised her eyes from contemplation and looked at the three people who were walking away. They were so far away that she could only see a trace of their backs. They seemed to stop there and saw the palace maid put a veil on concubine Lan's face. There was really no need for a veil in the imperial palace. She might have sneaked out for fear of being known. I heard that concubine Lan was grounded by the emperor, and the emperor even sent guards to guard the door. Xiao Wanru said in a low voice. She seemed to be explaining it to Yu Jie, but also to herself. The doubts in her heart did not fade away because of this explanation. It was really too strange. She turned her eyes and looked at the stone table in front of her. Everything was arranged properly. The kettle on the stove happened to be boiling, and there was a faint steam coming out. The teacup in front of her was still hot. It could be seen that she was going to sit here and enjoy the scenery, which should have been arranged long ago. But now she left in a hurry, as if there was something chasing after her. Concubine Lan was really strange, but Xiao Wanru was destined to meet more than one such person today. Chapter 891. The peonies were in full bloom, and they were a national beauty. Such a scenery was rarely seen outside. The peonies in the courtyard were all exquisite, and the flowers were in full bloom, showing the demeanor of an emperor. Even though Xiao Wanru didn't like peonies the most in the past, she couldn't help but pay more attention to them at this time. She walked out of the pavilion slowly and appreciated the peonies as she walked. With no one else around, she felt very comfortable. However, when he saw Xiao Yanru, he lost his sense of freedom. Xiao Wanru didn't expect to see Xiao Yanru here. She heard that Xiao Yanru was sent to a remote corner. Not only was she not liked by the empress, but even the emperor didn't want to see her. It was really surprising that such a person would appear here. "Greetings, Your Highness." Xiao Yanru seemed to be very surprised. She had just come in from the gate of the courtyard. After being stunned for a moment, she suddenly bowed respectfully in a very natural manner. Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on Xiao Yanru, who was wearing a light dress. In the past, Xiao Yanru would never wear such a dress because of her identity. Even the principal maids around her would not wear it. Now Xiao Wanru wore it, which made people inexplicably pity her. Her days in the palace were probably not very good. Her face was a bit pale and thin, but this also made her look a bit more delicate and pitiful. Although she was not as beautiful as a national beauty, she had a kind of heart-tugging delicateness. Her clothes looked very ordinary and well-arranged. Her slender waist was tied up, which made her look even more delicate. Xiao Yanru's appearance had always been outstanding. Even under such circumstances, she looked more beautiful than ordinary. "Where are you going, Baolin?" Xiao Wanru motioned for her to rise and then asked lightly. "I have something to discuss with the queen," Xiao Yanru said vaguely. She looked extremely gloomy and no longer as dazzling as she used to be, which made her look less attractive. "I wonder which queen asked Baolin to make such a trip." Xiao Wanru looked behind Xiao Yanru. This peony garden was close to the Empress Dowager's Palace of Benevolent Peace, and it was also in the center of the imperial palace. Naturally, the remote place where Xiao Yanru lived now couldn't be compared with it. "It's Queen Zhaoi," Xiao Yanru answered softly. Zhaoi Di was the miss of Duke Yang's mansion. After entering the imperial palace, she was conferred the title of Zhaoi. When Xiao Wanru just entered the capital city, Di Fenglan bullied Xiao Wanru with the help of Zhaoi Di in the imperial palace. "Zhaoi doesn't seem to be inside," Xiao Wanru said. "This concubine knows." This concubine purposely took a detour to see the peonies here. I heard that the peonies here can't be found outside. Xiao Yanru said softly, without any of her former arrogance, as if she was really just a small Baolin forest. Seeing Xiao Wanru, a princess, there was only respect in her heart. Baolin, please. Xiao Wanru stepped aside and said with a smile. Xiao Yanru bowed respectfully to Xiao Wanru and then walked in slowly. Han Dan, the palace maid, followed closely behind her. No one noticed that she was holding the handkerchief tightly in her hand. When she passed by Xiao Wanru, she saw Xiao Wanru's faint smile and her back was soaked with cold sweat. If there was anyone she was most afraid of, it would be Princess Chen in front of her. There was no one else. Xiao Wanru didn't stop and turned to leave with Yujie. Hearing the footsteps behind her, as the footsteps faded away, Xiao Yanru stopped and turned around slowly. Her eyes, which looked gentle just now, were full of viciousness, jealousy, and hatred. Baolin. Han Dan also stopped. Seeing her cold face, she hurriedly reminded her. I know, but I really can't accept it. Why can a foreign bastard enjoy a high position, but I fall into such a situation? Xiao Yanru said in a low voice. She seemed to be talking to herself, but the viciousness in her words almost overflowed from her throat. Baolin, we have to hurry up. If the Empress finds out that Baolin Forest has come out, I'm afraid it will be inappropriate. Han Dan reminded her again. The Empress didn't like Baolin Forest, and the Emperor didn't even come to see Baolin Forest. Few people in the Imperial Palace could treat Xiao Yanru well, let alone a little palace maid like her. Han Dan had wanted to climb up, but she didn't expect that she had fallen into a worse situation than when she was in Chushu Palace. In fact, she regretted it. But there was nothing she could do about it. Now she could only follow Xiao Yanru step by step. Let's go. Xiao Yanru paused and turned to walk inside. At this time, she really couldn't sigh for herself. In the Imperial Palace, if she couldn't save herself, her life would really be over. She didn't come to see Zhao Di today, but to find out the whereabouts of concubine Lan. It was said that the emperor almost abolished concubine Lan because of her. Later, it was the Empress Dowager who came forward to suppress this matter and imprison concubine Lan. This was what she had found out with the help of Duke Xing's mansion. It was said that even though concubine Lan was imprisoned, she still won the favor of the emperor, who would still go to the palace where concubine Lan lived. Although the emperor didn't go there often due to the Empress Dowager's order, he actually went there all the time. Moreover, it was said that concubine Lan was not always imprisoned and could come out occasionally. Since the emperor didn't want to abolish the Empress Dowager anymore, the Empress Dowager turned a blind eye to it. Before Xiao Yanru entered the imperial palace, she had analyzed it. She felt that concubine Lan had always been the emperor's favorite concubine and the emperor's favorite concubine. Otherwise, concubine Lan, who had been imprisoned, couldn't have lived such a good life. Even the empress couldn't avoid concubine Lan. All the topics about concubine Lan were never talked about in the Fengyi Palace. As for everything about concubine Lan, it gradually became a taboo in the imperial palace, and no one was allowed to talk about it. When Xiao Yanru entered the imperial palace in the past, she had secretly pretended not to know and wandered to the palace where concubine Lan lived, hoping to see concubine Lan. Unexpectedly, she was reprimanded by Chu Luyue and asked to stay far away from concubine Lan's residence. She had an accident in the Empress's Fengyi Palace that day. No matter what she did next, the Empress wouldn't like her. Others knew that she wasn't favored by the Empress, so no one dared to help her openly. Even Zhao Di took care of her a little bit through her relationship with concubine Lan. She had to have a backer in the imperial palace. The Empress was impossible, and the Emperor didn't like her now, let alone the Empress Dowager. The only change was concubine Lan. If she could win the favor of concubine Lan, the emperor's favorite concubine, her life in the imperial palace would definitely be better. Moreover, concubine Lan had fallen into such a situation. It was also because of the empress. Concubine Lan and the empress were bound to be incompatible. With these reasons, Xiao Yanru was confident that as long as she met Concubine Lan, she would definitely be able to persuade Concubine Lan to help her. Xiao Yanru sneaked here in the name of Zhao Di. However, she didn't expect to meet Xiao Wanru, so she felt jealous and resentful at the moment. However, she also knew that it was not the time to be jealous of Xiao Wanru. She calmed down and hurried into the peony garden. After searching around, she didn't find Concubine Lan. She only saw the kettle, stove, and 2 teacups on the table in the pavilion on one side, which had become cold after Concubine Lan left. Standing in the pavilion, Xiao Yanru looked at the stone table in front of her with a gloomy look and a fierce look, without saying a word. Baolin, sit for a while. I'll go and look around again. Maybe Concubine Lan is hiding somewhere and doesn't want to see anyone. Han Dan, who was very good at reading the situation, suggested. There's no need to go. She has left. Xiao Yanru shook her head. Not necessarily. Like Baolin, Concubine Lan is inconvenient to see others. It's very likely that she is hiding. Han Dan didn't give up. She also hoped that Xiao Yanru could stand up for her. It was really hard for Han Dan to not stand up for her. Not to mention Xiao Yanru, even Han Dan herself had a hard time and was criticized everywhere. Xiao Wanru has met Concubine Lan just now. Xiao Yanru walked to the stone table, picked up a teacup, took a look at it, and said coldly with anger in her eyes. She had tried so hard to meet the person she wanted to meet, but she unexpectedly met Xiao Wanru by chance as soon as she entered the imperial palace. Thinking about the situation of the attack, she felt that it was the same. She wanted to be Princess Yu, Princess Shou, Princess Chen, or Princess Xian, but in the end, she became the lowest level Baolin, while Xiao Wanru could become Princess Chen. Why? She was the eldest legitimate daughter of the entire Duke Xing's mansion, who had been pampered by all the beauties and beauties. How could Xiao Wanru, a wild child from outside, compare with her? Han Dan lowered her head and didn't dare to say anything again. At this time, Baolin was often emotionally unstable, which could be seen from the ferocious and vicious look on his beautiful face. At this time, as a servant, she'd better not say anything. It became quiet in the pavilion, and there was only the sound of the wind blowing in her ears. Xiao Yanru put down the teacup in her hand heavily, and the hatred on her face slowly faded, leaving only a little coldness. She said, "Let's go back first. Tell them later. If there is any trace of Concubine Lan next time, report it to me as soon as possible." "Yes, I'll go and tell them later." Han Dan breathed a sigh of relief and said hurriedly. "It's late when we came out. Let's go back early." Xiao Yanru nodded and turned to walk out of the pavilion. She was not favored now, so she had to keep a low profile. Moreover, she didn't really want to sleep with the emperor. Although the emperor was powerful, he was old after all, and no one knew when he would die. Young people were more reliable. In fact, it didn't matter to Baolin. At least he could hide in a corner of the palace for the time being. She had been too eager to make progress before, so she ended up in this situation. Of course, it was only her body that she could hide temporarily, not her heart. Since she had come to the imperial palace and enjoyed such a unique condition, she couldn't let these factors of benefit run away in vain. She would not miss any of the things that originally belonged to her. It was not the first time in history that such things had happened to the concubines of 2 dynasties. Chapter 892. When Xiao Wanru returned to the Palace of Benevolent Peace, the Empress Dowager had not woken up yet. After sitting in the side hall for a while, she saw Chu Luqian coming back. After waving his hand to ask all the palace servants to leave, Chu Luqian came over and sat down on a chair on one side. Then he reached out to pull Xiao Wanru, who was sitting beside him, up and held her in his arms. Xiao Wanru blushed with shame, and her bright watery eyes involuntarily became misty. She struggled hard. However, Chu Luqian looked weak, but in fact, he was very strong. He pressed Xiao Wanru to sit on his lap and didn't loosen his grip. "Let go of me. If someone sees." Xiao Wanru blushed and twisted her body hard, trying to get off his lap. It was really not dignified, and they were in the palace. What are you afraid of? We are husband and wife now, and we will do more intimate things, not to mention these. Chu Luchen said naturally, but he didn't loosen his grip and held Xiao Wanru tightly in his arms. This is the palace. Xiao Wanru blushed and said in a low voice. So what? Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows and looked confused, as if he really didn't know what was going on. Only his smiling eyes showed that he did it on purpose. Imperial grandmother will find out. Xiao Wanru reached out and pinched him. How could he be so thick-skinned? He had such a handsome face, but he did such a rogue thing. However, he pretended to know nothing, which was really annoying. You are afraid that Imperial grandmother will know. Don't worry. There are only 2 of us here, and no one will see it. Chu Luchen explained seriously, but he couldn't hide the smile on his face. Xiao Wanru wanted to pinch him again. Did they need to see this kind of thing? The 2 of them had sent everyone out. What kind of good things could there be for them to think about? Your Highness. Xiao Wanru tried to puff up her little face to show her displeasure. She thought that she was showing a serious face, but unexpectedly, her delicate little face looked a little more cute because of the slightly puffed-up expression. In the past, she gave people the feeling that she was elegant with a hint of gentleness, just the right amount of stunning beauty. But now, there was a hint of a girl's coquettishness, which made people feel that she was more and more adorable. Chu Luchen felt that he could love her more, so he turned his head and kissed her on the cheek. Then his lips fell on her pink petal-like cherry lips, and he couldn't help but breathe a little quickly. This is the Palace of Benevolent Peace. Xiao Wanru was really anxious and pushed him hard. It was one thing for the 2 of them to talk secretly, but if it was true, when the Empress Dowager summoned him, how could he face her? Seeing that she was really angry out of shame, Chu Luchen stopped teasing her. He smiled and held her slender waist without going further. Seeing that Chu Luchen stopped, Xiao Wanru breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, she stopped struggling and let him hold her. She turned her body slightly to find a slightly more comfortable position, leaned against his chest, and played with a jade pendant hanging on the jade belt around his waist with one hand. This jade pendant was the warm jade he gave her, which was later exchanged by the Empress Dowager. It was also because of this jade pendant that the Empress Dowager made up her mind to marry her to Chu Luchen, right? Thinking of this, her heart softened. What? Do you like it? Chu Luchen looked down at her, obediently nestled in his arms and played with the jade pendant. He couldn't help laughing. No. Xiao Wanru blushed and her hands stopped. If you like it, just say it. Just like if you like me, just say it. I won't blame you. Chu Luchen said with a little pride. Xiao Wanru felt that the bottom line of Prince Chen in front of her could be refreshed again. How could he say it as if it was true? I don't like you, Your Highness. I only like your jade pendant. You gave it to me, but it was just a trick. Xiao Wanru curled her lips and retorted in a low voice. She meant that Chu Luchen didn't keep his word. He could get back what he had given away. Although he didn't ask for it back himself at that time, he obviously knew that the Empress Dowager would exchange it back when he schemed that she wore this jade pendant to meet the Empress Dowager. Her coquettish look pleased Chu Luchen. He liked Xiao Wanru's sulky look more, because she sincerely regarded him as one of her own. Otherwise, with Xiao Wanru's cold look, she wouldn't care about such a small thing. At this time, his handsome eyes became more and more cheerful. Don't worry, I won't ask you to be a trick. My things are also your things. There is no distinction between you and me. No, Your Highness's things are mine, and my things are still mine. Xiao Wanru said seriously, blinked her watery eyes, and curled up the corners of her mouth. Well, everything of mine is yours, and yours is still yours. Chu Luchen said with a charming smile. He had never been a person who abided by rules, especially at this time. Seeing Xiao Wanru like this, of course, he couldn't help wanting to get some benefits. He wanted to stretch out his hands slightly, but when he continued to move up, Xiao Wanru grabbed his big hand. "Your Highness," Xiao Wanru said with a blush. Okay, I actually didn't do anything. I just wanted to take a look." Chu Luchen looked at Xiao Wanru's chest with regret, and then sighed in a low voice. "When will you be marriageable? It's too slow. I really want autumn to come soon." How long could he bear it? Chu Luchen felt that although he was married and protected the person in his heart by his side, the feeling of seeing but not touching was actually heart-wrenching. His words were extremely explicit. How could Xiao Wanru not understand it? She couldn't help but pinch his hand hard again. He really could be more shameless and thick-skinned. How could he say such words? "Your Highness, the Empress Dowager has woken up and invites you to go over." Xiao Xuanzi's voice suddenly came from outside the hall. Xiao Wanru hurriedly stood up and stood aside to tidy up her dress. She didn't know if she had messed it up just now. "Come here, I'll help you fix it." Chu Luchen stood up and said. Although Xiao Wanru blushed, she still walked over as he said. After all, she couldn't see what was wrong with herself. Chu Luchen first pulled a strand of hair that had fallen down to the back of her head, and then he lowered his body and gently pulled the corner of her dress to straighten the messy corner of her dress. Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on his serious face. He lowered his body and bent down to tidy up her dress. His smile was elegant and gentle, and she felt inexplicably warm in her heart. A person like him was actually willing to bend down to do these things for her. "Okay, let's go." After Chu Luchen finished tidying up, he stood up, looked at Xiao Wanru, and then reached out to pull her out. Xiao Wanru, although she was shy, she didn't struggle anymore, but she was very nervous. Even though she had married Chu Luchen, she was embarrassed to hold hands with him in front of the Empress Dowager. Fortunately, when Chu Luchen arrived at the door, he put down her hand, which made her breathe a sigh of relief. The Empress Dowager had been waiting for them in the Great Hall. Seeing them come in together, she looked at them and felt more and more satisfied. The Empress Dowager, who had just woken up, was in good spirits. After chatting and laughing with them for a while, she asked Chu Luchen about going to the imperial study just now. Xiao Wanru sat quietly aside and listened to their conversation. "What did your uncle say?" the Empress Dowager asked, and the smile on her face slowly faded. "About this, Uncle said that he would send someone to the Su state." Chu Luchen said gently. "Who will go?" The Empress Dowager suddenly sat up straight and became uneasy. Xiao Wanru couldn't help but feel nervous and inexplicably felt uneasy. "Imperial Grandmother," Chu Luchen said with a smile, and the look on his face became more and more gentle. You really let you go there?" The Empress Dowager's face changed dramatically, and her voice trembled. She reached out to grab Chu Luchen's sleeve and said, "How can I let you go there? Your body has not recovered yet." She really looked like a loving grandmother of an ordinary family who protected her grandson. Xiao Wanru's face changed dramatically. In the last life, most of her memories about Chu Luchen were hearsay, and only the last scene was engraved in her heart. In this life, she married Chu Luchen much earlier than in the last life. She didn't know what happened to Chu Luchen at this time in the last life, but because of the words in front of her, some things in the depths of her memory were turned up. It seemed that Prince Chen almost lost his life on a trip. Considering the time, it could be the trip to the Su state. The southern border was remote. Although the Su state was a small country, there were some things that the Central Plains didn't know. Xiao Wanru didn't want Chu Luchen to take risks. She opened her watery eyes. Although she didn't say anything, she looked at Chu Luchen nervously, for fear that he would leave. "Imperial Grandmother, don't worry. I won't go to the Su state. I'm just sending the officials on a trip on behalf of my uncle. The Su state is a remote small country, but it keeps getting involved in our affairs. My uncle and grandson both feel that there must be something wrong with it." Chu Luchen comforted the Empress Dowager with a smile and didn't forget to wink his right eye at Xiao Wanru. The remnants of the previous dynasty had to be eliminated as soon as possible, so it was imperative to go to the Su state this time. His rascally behavior made Xiao Wanru angry and annoyed, but she was relieved in her heart. She didn't know what had happened in the last life, and she couldn't control Chu Luchen at that time. But in this life, she wouldn't let Chu Luchen take this risk again. Okay, it's good that you don't go. But if you don't go, who did your uncle send? The Empress Dowager nodded repeatedly, felt relieved, and asked casually. In fact, it didn't matter to the Empress Dowager as long as Chu Luchen didn't go. Commandery Prince Qing volunteered to go. Chu Luchen smiled slightly, and there was a hint of coldness in his narrow eyes. Of course, Chu Qing didn't mean to ask for permission. He just wanted to force him to go on a trip. If Xiao Wanru didn't come, he wouldn't care. It was good for him to go out and meet people. Anyway, he didn't care how dangerous it was. But now he had someone he wanted to protect, so he naturally couldn't let Chu Qing get what he wanted. Chapter 893. Commandery Prince Qing. He's going there. Empress Dowager frowned. She really didn't like Chu Qing very much, but thinking of his family background, she felt a little pity for him. Of course, her pity couldn't be compared with Chu Liuchen's. Yes, he asked to go there. Because of the matter of the Su state, my uncle specially called him over. He repeatedly found the things of the Su state. I'm afraid that the Su state is really spying on us. Chu Luchen said implicitly. Since Chu Qing wanted to go there, he meant to send him there. The remnants of the Su state were the most difficult to deal with, and the current opportunity was just right. Xiao Wanru looked at him silently and felt relieved. She had the same idea as Empress Dowager. As long as Chu Luchen didn't go there, she didn't care. Did he go there alone? Empress Dowager asked. Please ask Ningyuan Army General to escort him. Chu Luchen shook his head. Ningyuan Army General. Xiao Wanru's long eyelashes fluttered twice. She hadn't heard this name for a long time, and hearing it again seemed like a lifetime had passed. I'm relieved to have Ningyuan Army General with me. Since your imperial uncle has decided so, you can go and see them off at that time. However, your health has always been poor. If you really can't hold on, let Prince Yu and Prince Zhou go. The Empress Dowager's favoritism was obviously deviated from her words. His partiality was not just ordinary partiality. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly, but she still liked Empress Dowager's partiality. Imperial grandmother, I've said many times that I've recovered. I'm fine. Even if I'm a little weaker than ordinary people, it won't threaten my life. Chu Luchen said. Good, my grandson has recovered. He's fine. Empress Dowager said with a smile. Seeing Chu Liuchen's current appearance, she was relieved. Finally, the child was saved. For so many years, she was afraid that she would die before her son. She heard the bad news from Prince Chen's mansion in fear. Now the situation was the best. Thinking of this, Empress Dowager glanced at Xiao Wanru, who was sitting aside gently and extremely gentle. The more she looked at her, the more pleased she felt. It seemed that since Chen proposed to marry this girl, her health had been getting better and better. This girl was really Prince Chen's lucky star. Thinking of this, she found Xiao Wanru more pleasing to the eye. This girl was really Prince Chen's lucky star. Thinking of this, Empress Dowager and Xiao Wanru became more and more pleasing to the eye. When they returned to the mansion, it was almost time for dinner. After walking in the peony courtyard for a while and talking with the Empress Dowager, Xiao Wanru was really hungry. When the dinner was served, there were more of her favorite dishes, so she poured half a bowl of rice into the bowl. Xian Qing after Shi, Su, Ti, Wang's, Tian, Qing, Shi, Ti, Chu, Ri Xiao Wanru readily agreed. Even if Chu Luchen didn't say it, she would have suggested it. It was good for his health. Although Chu Luchen was not as weak as she imagined, he still needed this way of keeping fit. Although Chu Luqian was not as weak as I thought, he still needed to take care of his health. Xiao Wanru agreed readily. Xiao Wanru wanted to get rid of his hand, but he held it tightly, so she couldn't get rid of it for a while. Thinking of how he had lowered his noble body and naturally tidied up her clothes, her heart softened and she stopped getting rid of his hand. Chu Luqian was immediately sensitive to Xiao Wanru's indulgence. He held her hand tighter and then walked out of the courtyard with Xiao Wanru. A group of servant girls and eunuchs followed them from a distance. After walking in silence for a while, Chu Luqian looked sideways at her and asked with a smile, "Why don't you speak? Didn't you have a lot to ask before?" "Your Highness," Xiao Wanru said angrily. She did have a lot to ask, but when she could, she found that she couldn't start to ask at the moment. "Well, I won't ask. Forget it." Chu Luqian raised the corner of his mouth and said lazily. "Why did you go to the Su state?" Xiao Wanru rolled her eyes at him and asked. Some of the previous things were related to the Su state, and what we found out also involved Commandery Prince Qing. Now we can't investigate it anymore. Everything points to the Su state. Uncle is worried, so he wants to send an envoy to have a look. Chu Luqian said casually. There seemed to be more than one thing related to the Su state. It seemed that someone had been secretly in touch with the Su state, but they couldn't find this person. Chu Qing could use this to ask for permission. Chu Qing was actually a person with a lot of stories. There was a trace of indiscernible deepness in his eyes. Fortunately, you didn't go. I have heard of the Su state. I heard that the Su state is very remote. Although it is a small country, there are some things and things in it that are very evil. You'd better not go there if you can. The small country in Nanjiang was actually nothing, but there were some things in such a small country that people in the Central Plains could not understand. Xiao Wanru had read this extremely strange thing in a book. It didn't seem to be true, but more like a legend of ghosts and monsters. But if it was just a legend of ghosts and monsters, it didn't seem to be true. Anyway, Xiao Wanru was very concerned about the Su state. Of course, it was also because Chu Luqian had almost died there in the last life. I know that you care about me going to the Su state, so I naturally won't go there. We are newlyweds. How can I bear to let Zhuozhuo stay alone in the boudoir? Chu Luqian's eyebrows fluttered, and he looked a little roguish in his handsome face, which was very different from his elegant and noble appearance in the past. Your Highness. Xiao Wanru blushed, glared at him and said. How could he say such words in front of others? Okay, I'll talk to you when there is no one around. Chu Luqian immediately understood Xiao Wanru's meaning and coaxed her. The doting look in his eyes was as clear as spring water. Xiao Wanru blushed again. How could such words be explained in this way? She couldn't help stamping her feet with hatred, and her heart couldn't help beating wildly. This guy was really getting more and more shameless now, and he was getting more and more offline. Alright, I'll talk to you about proper business. In a few days, I'll be sending them to the border. Chu Luqian knew that he couldn't tease her anymore. If he continued to tease her, she would really get angry out of embarrassment, so he stopped while he was ahead. Send them so far? Xiao Wanru gasped. She had thought that they would be sent to a place like the 10 Miles Pavilion outside the capital city. Yes, send them so far. It's uncertain whether the envoy can come back safely, so I have to leave someone there to keep an eye on them. Chu Luqian said indifferently. Is it dangerous to go on a mission? Xiao Wanru was stunned and widened her watery eyes. She immediately forgot her embarrassment and anger just now, and suddenly felt a little uneasy. It's definitely dangerous, but it's not necessarily bad. The Su state hasn't come to pay tribute for so many years, so it must be in a bad mood against us. But it's not certain. At least the Su state is still our vassal state, so it can't cause too much trouble. Chu Luqian said lightly with a trace of coldness in his shimmering eyes. Of course, there were some things that he could not tell Xiao Wanru. The Su kingdom had never been a peaceful factor, not to mention that the crown prince had yet to be decided. It seemed like the Su kingdom would intervene in this matter. In addition, there was another reason why Chu Luqian noticed Su country early, which was that some old ministers of the former dynasty had fled to Su country. Although Su country said that they would find all these people, after so many years, very few of them had been found, and they were scattered all over the place. It was said that there was a royal family in the previous dynasty. At that time, they also fled to the Su kingdom. At present, it was unknown whether he was buried in the Su country or colluded with the people of the Su country. Some of the things he did that day, of course, had his own plans in other aspects, but also in this aspect. Of course, this trip to the Su kingdom was also a beginning for him. His handsome eyes glanced at Xiao Wanru's concerned little face, and he slightly raised the corners of his mouth to show a smile. Since he wanted to protect Zhuozhuo, he must not be trampled on. There were some things that he didn't care about before, but now he could make use of them. Xiao Wanru thought for a while, understood Chu Liuqian's meaning, and said in surprise, "Your Highness, are you going to the border to prepare troops and put pressure on the Su kingdom so that they don't dare to act rashly?" Was the situation in the Su kingdom so serious? Did it already need to prepare troops to show off? When they were in the imperial palace just now, Chu Luqian and the Empress Dowager didn't say anything. The Empress Dowager should have thought that she just wanted to send him out of the capital city, but she didn't expect that Chu Luqian would send him to the border. With the Empress Dowager's character, how could she be willing to do that? "Yes, I must go this time, but I need you to take care of Imperial Grandmother. If I go to the border, Imperial Grandmother should ask you to go to the Imperial Palace from time to time. When you go to the Imperial Palace, you only need to accompany Imperial Grandmother and don't go anywhere else. I'm not in the capital city, so I'm afraid that I might miss something and put you in danger." Chu Luqian stood still, looked down at Xiao Wanru softly, and said with deep affection in his eyes. Xiao Wanru also stood still, looked at Chu Luqian, and then took the initiative to lean against him and said softly, "Your Highness, be careful. I will be in the mansion, and nothing will happen. As for the Imperial Palace, Imperial Grandmother is also there, so I will be more careful." She did that to reassure Chu Luqian and also to make herself vigilant. Chu Liuqian's trip would probably attract a lot of people secretly. If he came back victorious in the future, it would be the first credit, so there were many more people targeting him than before. If there is anything you can't solve, wait for me to come back and deal with it. Remember that you are Princess Chen, so you don't need to give in to others too much. In the Imperial Palace, except for Imperial Grandmother, you don't need to care about others. Chu Luqian snorted coldly and said with some displeasure. "Yes, I will not let down the reputation of Prince Chen's mansion." Xiao Wanru couldn't help laughing. She knew that her overly vigilant words made him unhappy. Prince Chen had always been arrogant in the Imperial Palace, so he couldn't bear to see her timid. He was afraid that she would be bullied, so he didn't dare to say it out. The smile at the bottom of her eyes froze. Since she had decided to be with him, she would be with him for the rest of her life. No matter how big the storm was, she was willing to bear it with him. "Okay, remember not to let others bully you. If someone schemed against you, I will leave a secret guard for you. If you directly meet the Empress, don't worry. Just go to Imperial Grandmother." Chapter 894. Chu Luqian instigated with a bit of arrogance and fierceness, "If you can't do it, I'll avenge you when I come back. Whoever bullies you, I'll kill him." Okay, I got it." Xiao Wanru pushed him with a smile. With this push, the fierceness on his face disappeared, and he became lazy again. The two of them chatted as they walked. Seeing that it was getting late, they returned to the main courtyard. After sitting down in the room, Xiao Wanru got up, went to the inner room, and took out a small ornamental box from it. Before she could say anything, she saw Chu Liuqian's face change. He suddenly stood up, picked up the ornamental box that he had just put down, and threw it out of the room. "Your Highness." Xiao Wanru was startled. Chu Luqian had never been so angry in front of her. His handsome eyes were gloomy without a trace of warmth. "If you see this person again in the future, just ignore her." Chu Luchen was not polite at all, and a trace of disgust appeared on his cold face. Your Highness, know her? Xiao Wanru asked. Chu Liuchen's look showed that it was concubine Lan who gave her something, but she didn't know why Chu Luchen was so angry. Was there any secret about the emperor's former favorite concubine? Otherwise, she and Chu Luchen, who had nothing to do with each other, would not have any relationship with each other, let alone make Chu Luchen so angry. It seemed that she had stabbed Chu Luchen in the heart. Of course I know her. She is unaccountably solicitous. Zhuozhuo, you don't have to pay attention to her. Chu Luchen sneered, and his eyes were full of coldness with a bloodthirsty aura. Okay, I'll be careful to avoid her when I enter the palace in the future. Xiao Wanru said softly and meekly. Xiao Wanru's words made Chu Luchen feel a little better. He nodded at once and said seriously, since she is in the palace, you can't avoid her even if you want to. Just ignore her. No matter what she says, don't care. Xiao Wanru could understand some of his words, but she couldn't understand some of them. Hearing Chu Liuchen's words, today's meeting in the Peony Garden did not seem to be a coincidence. Thinking of the palace maids they met along the way and the direction they nodded, it seemed that there were indeed traces to be found. How could a palace maid in dire straits have such great ability to investigate his whereabouts, especially when he came from the Empress Dowager's Palace of Benevolent Peace? She will probably meet you again in the future. If you don't want to see her, turn around and leave. Chu Luchen said again. All right, I'll do as you say. Xiao Wanru nodded, and a trace of doubt flashed across her watery eyes. She felt more and more confused about this matter. However, it seemed that Chu Luchen didn't want to talk about concubine Lan. He was so disgusted that he didn't even want to mention it. Of course, she wouldn't force Chu Luchen to mention it. She just needed to stay away from concubine Lan in the future. On the day we return home, this prince will take you to the streets to pick some jewelry. Chu Luchen calmed down and reached out to hold Xiao Wanru's slightly cold hand. After walking for a while, his hand was very cold. Your Highness, are you going to take me to the streets? Xiao Wanru said in surprise, regardless of the fact that her hand was still held by Chu Luchen. Seeing that the two of them were so intimate, the maids and Xiao Xuanzi had already left quietly. Of course. Chu Luchen nodded and showed a smile on his face. He was still an elegant and gentle young man, as if the cold and gloomy person she had seen just now was not him. Xiao Wanru had long been accustomed to his change of face. It was indeed not concubine Lan. In the past, it might be more convenient for her to go out. But now she was Prince Chen's wife and was newly married, so it was not easy for her to go out. It was great that Chu Luchen could take her out. Thank you, Your Highness. Xiao Wanru broke away from his hand and bowed deeply to Chu Luchen. Chu Luchen was also in a good mood. He reached out to pull her up and asked with a smile, isn't it too insincere to thank me in such a way? The matter that had been pressing on his heart had been pressing on him for so many years. Every time he thought of it, he had never been happy. But now when he saw Xiao Wanru's teasing smile, his heart felt warm. He had always known what he needed to care about and what he didn't care about. He immediately pushed aside all the previous frustrations. Now he was not only alone, but also had a person he missed. Moreover, this person happened to be in love with him, so there were some things that he didn't need to take too much to heart. What do you want, Your Highness? Xiao Wanru looked up at the affection in his eyes, which almost overflowed with love. She suddenly blushed and turned her face away uncomfortably. Chu Luchen leaned over and whispered in Xiao Wanru's ear. Xiao Wanru was so angry that her face seemed to be burning. Not only her face, but also her neck and ears seemed to have a fever. This person looked sanctimonious, but in fact, he really had no bottom line. Xiao Wanru spat at him in a low voice, turned around and walked into the inner room. Chu Luchen leisurely patted his sleeves. Of course, at this time, he couldn't push her too hard. He had to take it slow. Xiao Wanru had prepared the gift list early. Xiao Wanru had read the gift list in advance. The gift list was very rich and detailed. Different people gave gifts according to different identities. No matter how picky a person was, he or she could not find anything wrong with the gift list. Because there were no other masters in the mansion, the young couple didn't get up early. After breakfast, it was almost time, so they got in the carriage of Prince Chen's mansion and went to Marquis Xing's mansion together. They took a big circle all the way. When they arrived at the gate of Marquis Xing's mansion, old Madame had already waited at the gate with a group of people. Marquis Xing would not pay so much attention to Prince Chen's identity, but old Madame and Marquis Xing had to curry favor with Prince Chen, who was the most favored and trusted by the Emperor and the Empress Dowager. What was more, Marquis Xing's mansion was not the Duke Xing's mansion that had been favored by the Emperor in the past. Chu Luqian got out of the carriage first, and then helped Xiao Wanru get out together. Xiao Wanru was not tall, but the carriage of Prince Chen's mansion was extremely wide and tall. When she finally landed, Chu Luqian also pulled her sleeves hard, for fear that she would fall. It was obvious that he was afraid that she would fall. Old Madame and Xiao Jing looked at each other calmly and knew what was going on. Prince Chen was really good to Xiao Wanru. At this time, old Madame also regretted it. If she had known that Prince Chen really cared about Xiao Wanru, she shouldn't have been indifferent to Xiao Wanru and even didn't support her when there was something wrong. Now it was not so easy for her to support Marquis Xing's mansion. "Greetings, Your Highness." "Greetings, Your Highness." But it was not the time to regret it. Old Madame restrained her thoughts and stepped forward to bow with a smile. Chu Luqian said lightly, "Rise." Although he looked gentle, there was a hint of indifference in his tone, which made Xiao Jing frown secretly. He really wanted to ask Prince Chen for something, but it seemed that Prince Chen probably wouldn't agree to it easily. Xiao Wanru bowed deeply to old Madame. Even though she was now Prince Chen, she was still old Madame's junior, so she had to bow, especially when she returned home today. "Well, it's windy here. Don't talk here. Let's go in together." Old Madame smiled and reached out to pull Xiao Wanru intimately. Xiao Wanru stepped back and happened to avoid old Madame's hand. Then she smiled slightly, as if her behavior just now was just a misunderstanding. Old Madame's face suddenly became very ugly, but then she showed a kind smile and walked in first. At this time, she couldn't be angry with Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru raised her long eyelashes and was surprised that old Madame could bear it. Her behavior just now was a disgrace to old Madame, but she didn't expect that old Madame could bear it so calmly. Her eyes blinked twice to hide the deepness at the bottom of her eyes. She now knew old Madame very well. She was a person who would not get up early without benefits. Since she bowed to her, she must have something else to ask for, but she didn't know what it was. However, she was not in a hurry. She just needed to wait and see what she would say next. Chu Luqian followed Xiao Jing and Xiao Hua into the front yard, while Xiao Wanru followed old Madame and other womenfolk to old Madame's residence in the backyard. Everyone sat down according to the guest and the host. Xiao Wanru naturally sat in the first seat of the guest. Now people would only call her Princess Chen instead of the fifth miss of Marquis Xing's mansion. As soon as a woman got married, her identity changed along with her husband. Old Madame sat in the main seat, and Zhao Shiran sat beside her with a smile. On the other side, the third madam also struggled to stand up. On one side of the third madam were the third miss and the fourth Mississippi. The second miss, Xiao Jia, sat beside Zhao Shiran with her head lowered. It seemed that Xiao Jia, had been keeping her head lowered like this since Xiao Wanru came in. She was very well behaved. Xiao Jia, who was the noisiest in the past, was now well behaved after being locked up. In fact, Xiao Wanru didn't believe it. Xiao Caihuan also lowered her head. Occasionally, when she raised her head to look at Xiao Wanru, there was a little shame in her eyes. Xiao Kailing was the happiest one. She got along well with Xiao Wanru now. She was really a little reluctant to let Xiao Wanru get married so early. However, it was a matter of the royal family, which couldn't be controlled by a little girl from an aristocratic family. "Wanru, how does Prince Chen treat you?" Old Madam looked at Xiao Wanru with a smile. Seeing that Xiao Wanru's face was still ruddy, her skin was as white as snow, and she didn't look dispirited at all, she knew that Xiao Wanru had a good life in Prince Chen's mansion. So she just asked a polite question. This was a question that female elders must ask when they returned home, which also showed that the elders valued and didn't trust women. Very good. Xiao Wanru said softly with a light smile, just like all the new brides, with a touch of shyness, which was very pleasant and made her look more charming and charming. Xiao Jia stole a glance at Xiao Wanru with jealousy in her eyes. Why did Xiao Wanru get all the good things but not her? She was the one who was born in Marquis Xing's mansion, so she couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as a foreign servant girl. That's great. You're married now. Among the sisters, only you're married to a man that Grandma can rest assured about. If the other sisters can do the same, even if I die, I'll close my eyes and mouth. Old Madam sighed and said. Xiao Wanru sneered in her heart and thought to herself, here it comes. As expected, they are waiting for me here. End of this chapter. Chapter 895. Xiao Wanru picked up the handkerchief and gently pressed it on her delicate little face. She looked up with a smile and said, my sisters will marry well in the future. Grandma, you don't have to worry about them. Grandma, fifth sister is right. It will only be better in the future. How can it not be good? My sisters will also marry good families. You can rest assured. Zhao Shiran, who had always been so resourceful, hurriedly said with a smile after hearing Old Madam's words. She asked someone to walk behind Old Madam, pick up the knocker placed aside, and gently knock Old Madam's back. Her movements were extremely natural. Seeing the satisfaction in Old Madam's eyes, Xiao Wanru's eyes darkened. Zhao Shiran was really smart. It had only been a few days, but Old Madam had changed her opinion of her. It seemed that Zhao Shiran had also intervened in the following matter. Old Madam would never be good to others for no reason. If it was useless, it would be useless to please her. Yes, Mother. You are so healthy. How can you say such words? It makes me really uncomfortable. The third madam said with a smile. The smile on her face was a little forced, but she didn't slow down. After so many things had happened, the third madam had been able to bear the responsibility, but now she couldn't bear it anymore. Everything in the mansion was slowly transferred to Zhao Shiran. It was obvious that Old Madam intended to accompany Zhao Shiran. Regarding this matter, the third madam didn't dare to have any doubts. Originally, the master of the backyard was Old Madam, and she could take whoever she liked. I'm so old, so I don't ask for anything. I just hope that you brothers and sisters can live a good life and support each other in the future. Then I will do anything. Old Madam sighed again, reached out to rub her forehead, and said with infinite sadness, what happened to second miss and third miss? Speaking of this, Old Madam sighed and couldn't go on. It was obvious that she had encountered something sad and didn't know how to speak for a moment. Xiao Wanru didn't answer and just looked at the handkerchief in her hand calmly, as if she didn't understand the other meaning of Old Madam's words and didn't make it clear. Or in other words, she was not curious about Old Madam's unfinished thoughts. He seemed to be in a daze. Old Madam stole a glance at Xiao Wanru and saw her sitting there like a wooden figure. She was so angry. As expected, Xiao Wanru was not raised by her, so she was not considerate to her. She had made it so obvious, but Xiao Wanru didn't even ask for her opinion. If it were first miss who encountered this kind of thing, she would definitely stand on her side. Of course, the first maid couldn't help her now. Xiao Yenru had secretly sent a message to her in the imperial palace, so she naturally couldn't bother her with this kind of thing. At this time, Old Madam could only think of Xiao Wanru. However, Xiao Wanru didn't say anything, and Old Madam felt ashamed to say it herself. Glancing at Yu Shiran, who was standing aside, Zhao Shiran immediately understood. He looked up at Xiao Wanru with a smile and said, Fifth sister, there is one thing that Grandma is worried about. I don't know if I can trouble you to inquire about it and give our mansion a definite reply, lest Grandma can't eat well and sleep well during this period of time and be exhausted. Xiao Wanru slowly raised her head and glanced at old madam, who seemed to want to stop Xiao Shiran from speaking but didn't have time. Xiao Wanru slightly raised the corners of her mouth and said, "First sister-in-law, you're too polite. But what can I do to help Grandma? Grandma doesn't ask second uncle to do it, but asks me, a newly married girl, to do it?" Her rhetorical question was a little impolite and even a little tough. Zhao Shiran didn't expect that Xiao Wanru would not give face to old madam in front of so many people, so she directly retorted. After being stunned for a moment, she blushed. After all, she had just married into Marquis Xing's mansion. In front of so many people, she felt a little embarrassed to be retorted by Xiao Wanru indifferently. "Fifth miss, what do you mean?" Old madam was the first one who couldn't help but put down the teacup in her hand heavily. "You are also a daughter of Marquis Xing's mansion who got married. Are you going to ignore your mother's family after getting married? Grandma, it seems that you want me to choose between my mother's family and my husband's family, right?" Xiao Wanru had expected old madam's sudden cold attitude, so she raised her eyes and said unhurriedly. Her words almost made old madam vomit blood. What did she mean by choosing between her mother's family and her husband's family? Her husband's family was the royal family. Could she say that she had to take care of her mother's family and ignore her husband's family? If the Empress Dowager in the Imperial Palace knew about it, she would definitely punish Marquis Xing's mansion severely. "Fifth sister, how could Grandma mean this? I just want you to pass on a message." Seeing that the situation was not good, Zhao Shiran hurriedly cleared up her embarrassment and explained. "What if I don't want to?" Xiao Wanru said coldly. They couldn't go on talking about it. Xiao Jia, who was sitting aside, moved her body as if she wanted to stand up and speak, but she didn't dare to and still lowered her head. "Fifth sister, it's really not a big deal. I just want you to help me ask a question, or rather, I want Prince Chen to pass on a message, not to others, but to Commandery Prince Qing." Zhao Shiran had come to his senses and said with a smile, looking more and more amiable. Old madam originally wanted to give Xiao Wanru a warning by returning to the fifth Miss Xiao's family. Now it seemed that the former fifth Miss Xiao, who was now Princess Chen, was not afraid of a warning at all. Zhao Shiran thought it was better to play the family card at this time. After saying that, she secretly glanced at old madam and sneered in her heart. She didn't know what was going on in Marquis Xing's mansion. Instead of flattering Princess Chen, they seemed to want to plot against her. If it was easy to plot against Princess Chen, how could she fail at that time? Instead of playing the family card when returning to the fifth Miss Xiao's family, they showed such a bad look. No wonder Duke Xing's mansion wanted to become Marquis Xing's mansion. If they couldn't see clearly what they should do and what they shouldn't do, how could they prosper? "What's the matter, Commandery Prince Qing?" Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat. She had already understood what was going on, but she still asked lightly, with her eyes falling on Xiao Jia, in the corner of the room. "Why hasn't Commandery Prince Qing come to our mansion to propose marriage? He promised to give us an explanation for what happened in the Imperial Palace, but he hasn't come to our mansion yet. Grandma is very anxious. She originally wanted to ask father to go out and talk about it, but if a woman takes the initiative in this kind of thing, she will lose face eventually. So she thought of Prince Chen. Prince Chen and Commandery Prince Qing are brothers, so we can talk about it in private." Zhao Shiran said with a flattering smile. Her words were extremely polite, and she also told her that it was inconvenient for Marquis Xing's mansion to lobby for her. She didn't hide anything and seemed to be extremely frank. Zhao Shiran deserved to be the eldest lineal daughter of Minister Zhao's mansion. Her words were watertight and quite reasonable. Every word she said was reasonable. If Xiao Wanru still refused, she would appear to be petty. In addition, what old madam said in anger before it was a piece of cake for her to say that she had forgotten her roots in her current identity. Chu Qing and Chu Luqian were brothers, so it didn't take much effort for them to pass on a message. However, these were all on the surface. Although they were both the sons of the late emperor, they were of different importance. Chu Liuqin's identity and status were far higher than Chu Qing's. If Chu Liuqin passed on the message, even if Chu Qing had some other ideas before, he had to give Chu Liuqin face at this time and come to Marquis Xing's mansion to propose marriage. Old Madam was good at scheming, and so was Zhao Shiran. Of course, compared with Old Madam's attitude, Zhao Shiran's attitude was much more amiable and amiable. Grandma, do you mean to let Commandery Prince Qing marry my second sister? I heard that Commandery Prince Qing has been engaged, so I'm afraid that he can't marry my second sister as his legal wife. Xiao Wanru asked with a faint look in her eyes after hearing her words. Father and grandmother will tell Commandery Prince Qing about it. Fifth sister, don't worry. I just want Commandery Prince Qing to take the initiative to go to Marquis's mansion once. Zhao Shiran said vaguely and didn't say whether it was Xiao Jia, or. However, it did sound like a trivial matter to ask Chu Qing to come here. I'm afraid he can't do it recently. According to His Highness, Commandery Prince Qing seems to have an errand, so he may not be able to come to our mansion at this time. Anyway, this matter can't be rushed now. After Commandery Prince Qing is relieved of his current errand, I'll ask His Highness to go to Commandery Prince Qing's mansion. Xiao Wanru thought for a while and said seriously. Chu Qing was going to the Su state, and he probably wouldn't come back within 1 or 2 months. Old Madam was not in a hurry before, but now she was in a hurry, which made her have new doubts. No. Hearing Xiao Wanru's words, Old Madam couldn't help saying sternly. Grandma, why can't I do it? Is it necessary to be in such a hurry? Xiao Wanru asked slowly with an indifferent look on her face. Old Madam swallowed a mouthful of saliva, suppressed the rising anger in her heart, and made herself look kinder. Xiao Wanru's words just now made her clearly realize that Xiao Wanru's current identity was no longer the fifth miss of Marquis Xing's mansion. Even she had to bow to Xiao Wanru if she didn't have the identity of an elder. Your sister is old. If we wait any longer, I'm afraid that something bad will happen. Old Madam forced a smile and tried to make herself look kind and kind. Wait a little longer. Is there any change? Commandery Prince Qing is concentrating on his work at this time, so he definitely has no interest in marriage. Xiao Wanru said unhurriedly. Old Madam's attitude didn't affect her at all. Xiao Wanru had long been disappointed with Marquis Xing's mansion and Old Madam, so she naturally wouldn't have any expectations, because no matter how they treated her, Xiao Wanru wouldn't care. In fact, it's not an important change. It's just. Fifth sister, I won't treat you as an outsider. Let me tell you frankly. There are also other mansions proposing marriage. Their conditions are not bad, but they are not as good as Commandery Prince Qing's. I want to weigh it carefully. Only after Commandery Prince Qing expresses his opinion can we let go of this marriage. Otherwise, what should we do if both sides fail? Zhao Shiran immediately found the most suitable answer for the current situation and said with a smile. Proposing marriage? Whose family is it? Xiao Wanru asked in surprise. She really didn't expect this reason. Was it Xiao Jia's or Xiao Caihuan's? At this time, such a person suddenly appeared. It was really strange that this person was chosen at this time. End of this chapter. Chapter 896. Remember in 1 second, 800 male sign small slash say net. Zhao Shiran smiled awkwardly and said, in fact, it's not particularly powerful. In fact, it's not particularly powerful. But you've seen the situation of my second and third sisters. It's best to be able to find a son-in-law. After all, they know each other well. It's much better than being in the dark. Zhao Shiran smiled awkwardly and said. His words were almost the same as not saying anything, but Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat. Catching a son-in-law before the imperial examinations? In her previous life, she had caught a son-in-law before the imperial examinations. Could this so-called catching a son-in-law before the imperial examinations be because she had taken a fancy to that young master Yan Shi? In the last life, she and Yan Shi had obviously been framed. Now she had taken a fancy to Yan Shi or had other plans. No matter how she looked at it, it was not simple. Have you taken a fancy to a scholar? Xiao Wanru asked calmly and glanced at the faces of several people in the room. It hasn't been decided yet. In fact, I have taken a fancy to a few families, and they also have the same idea. But the girl of our marquis's mansion can't really marry a man in white. We have to wait until he passes the imperial examination. However, we have to pay close attention to whether Commandery Prince Qing's mansion will give us an answer now. If Commandery Prince Qing's mansion really doesn't like us, we can give up the marriage. Zhao Shiran said helplessly. Xiao Wanru understood the meaning of his words. Chu Qing had been hanging around Marquis Xing's mansion. He did not say whether he would marry or not. Before he gave a clear answer, Marquis Xing's mansion could not make another engagement. No matter what, Chu Qing was a descendant of the royal family. Moreover, it was related to the late emperor, so they had to be more careful sometimes. Moreover, it happened in the imperial palace at that time, and many people knew it. If Marquis Xing's mansion wanted to regret it, it would not be so easy, so they must give Chu Qing an answer. However, this statement was obviously different from the previous plan of Marquis Xing's mansion. Could it be that something happened in the past few days that made Marquis Xing's mansion change their attitude? Second uncle, didn't you ask someone else to ask Commandery Prince Qing for help? Xiao Wanru asked. A woman should be reserved. She didn't believe that Xiao Jing, with his mentality, would take the initiative to ask first. Now he put the blame on her, but it was more to take advantage of Chu Liuchen's influence to put pressure on Chu Qing quietly, so that he had to show his attitude to Marquis Xing's mansion. Compared with Chu Liuchen, Chu Qing, the son of the late emperor, was really inconspicuous. Father has asked someone to inquire about it before, but Commandery Prince Qing didn't tell the truth. Grandma has no choice but to think of you. If this matter is delayed, it will ruin your sister's marriage. It's okay if you don't like the girls of our Marquis Xing's mansion, but what should we do if you keep delaying it? Missing this year's spring quarter examinations would be a matter of 3 years. My sisters are all grown up and can't wait that long. Zhao Shiran said sincerely. Although this eldest sister-in-law had just married into the Marquis Xing's mansion, she had done a good job wholeheartedly. Xiao Wanru blinked and her eyes fell on Xiao Jia. Xiao Jia didn't react until now, as if this matter was someone else's business and had nothing to do with her. She still sat there with her head down. Xiao Caihuan's reaction was a little uneasy. She stole a glance at Xiao Wanru and then at Zhao Shiran, and then lowered her head. So Xiao Jia's marriage should have been arranged. Xiao Caihuan, not Xiao Jia. Xiao Jia's marriage should have been arranged. Thinking of what Xiao Jia had said at the beginning, a trace of sadness flashed across her eyes. Xiao Jing had given up Xiao Jia's marriage to Xiao Shui, and he seemed to be very confident about it. It seemed that both sides had agreed. Xiao Jing could make Xiao Jia give up her marriage to Xiao Caihuan. Given his character, this marriage should be better than Commandery Prince Qing's, so this person must also be from the royal family. Among the sons of the royal family, there were only Prince Yu, Prince Zhou, and Prince Xian. There was also Prince Cheng, who couldn't escape from them. They didn't know who Xiao Jing had made friends with and whose man he became, so he had the reason and opportunity to send his daughter to the royal family. Thinking of this, he didn't show any panic on his face. After listening to Zhao Shiran's words, he said unhurriedly, since this matter is so urgent, I'll talk to Prince Chen later, but I really don't know whether Prince Chen is willing to talk about it or not. It seems that there is no contact between our prince and Commandery Prince Qing. It doesn't matter whether it can be done or not. As long as Prince Chen can help us talk about it, we can't delay my sister's marriage. Fifth sister is married now, but the youngest one is married first. The other sisters also have to find someone else as soon as possible. Otherwise, it will be unpleasant to say. Zhao Shiran said and continued to speak with sincerity, as if everything he said was from the bottom of his heart. Old Madam was very satisfied with her position. After marrying into Marquis Xing's mansion, she would be a member of Marquis Xing's mansion. She always mentioned Marquis Xing's mansion. Old Madam was very satisfied with her position. This granddaughter-in-law was not disgusting. She could tell from her words that she was good and capable. There was no one in charge of the backyard of Marquis Xing's mansion now. Old Madam wanted to take charge of everything, but because she was old, she was powerless. If it weren't for the previous things, Old Madam would be wholeheartedly satisfied with this granddaughter-in-law. But now, she had to wait and see. Your sisters are in a special situation now, so I can't help them. You are now Princess Chen and the daughter of Marquis Xing's mansion. In the future, your bones will be broken and tendons will be connected. If your sisters get well, they can also help each other in the future. It's a good thing for you and them. Old Madam said gently. That's right. Fifth sister is now Princess Chen. I haven't congratulated you yet. Zhao Shiran was very good at dealing with people. She deliberately bowed sideways and said with a smile. Xiao Wanru slightly tilted her body to avoid her bow and said with a smile, First sister-in-law, you are too polite. Well, don't talk about these boring things. Wanru, just keep it in mind. I heard that you went to the Empress Dowager's palace before. Did the Empress Dowager say anything? Old Madam said with a smile, looking like a kind grandmother who cared about her little granddaughter. This was a sign that they had finished talking about business and could talk about some other things. Xiao Wanru sneered in her heart, but she didn't show it on her face. She talked about some things in the Empress Dowager's palace at that time and casually answered a few questions. Since there was no business to talk about, everyone talked enthusiastically. After a while, someone came from outside to invite them to sit down. The table was divided into men's table and women's table, which were placed in a room and slightly separated by a screen. It was both lively and respectful to men and women. Chu Liuchen he didn't drink. In addition, the two princes fought because of drinking before, so Marquis Xing's mansion didn't have the courage to let Chu Liuchen drink, so they could only work hard on the dishes. However, even if they worked hard, they couldn't be lively in front of Prince Chen, who was indifferent, gentle, but actually aloof. Even if Xiao Jing was slick and had been leading Chu Liuchen to talk outside, he just felt embarrassed. Prince Chen didn't appreciate it and didn't want to be close to Xiao Jing. Xiao Wanru sat inside and ate very calmly. She was also extremely embarrassed. As a new bride, Zhao Shiran was too embarrassed to say anything in this situation. The meal was extremely peaceful. After the meal, Xiao Wanru went back to her Piaoyun courtyard to rest for a while Chu Liuchen went to the guest room prepared for him by Marquis Xing's mansion. Originally, Chu Liuchen was going to go to the Piaoyun courtyard, but Xiao Jing kept persuading him, as if he had something to say to Chu Liuchen in private, so Xiao Wanru went back to the Piaoyun courtyard by herself. When she arrived at the Piaoyun courtyard and sat down, Qing came to report to her. Your Highness, after you got on the bridal sedan chair that day, Second Miss didn't go out. Instead, she went to the Marquis's courtyard. There were guards outside the courtyard, so I didn't dare to get too close to it. However, after staying inside for about 10 minutes, Second Miss left the Marquis's courtyard in tears. After that, I stayed for a while and saw the Marquis leave with her. Did it mean that Xiao Jing was the cause of Xiao Jia's unusual behavior at that time? Or Xiao Jing also found Xiao Jia's abnormality and specially went to ask about it? What happened later? Xiao Wanru picked up the tea at hand, took a sip, and said unhurriedly. There should be more to this matter. It was really strange that Xiao Jia didn't even dare to raise her head to look at her today. Later, I came back and continued to follow Second Mississippi. At that time, Second Miss had returned to her courtyard and looked very peaceful. I heard that she was going to go back to the Buddha Hall. The servant girl was preparing some daily necessities for her. The courtyard was a little busy and there were a lot of people coming and going, so I kept watching. In the evening, I saw an old maid come over. I remembered that this old maid was from the outer courtyard. Qing had been in Marquis Xing's mansion for a period of time. Moreover, she had a photographic memory. As long as she saw this person, she would always have some memories. Although she didn't often see an old maid from the outer courtyard, she had at least seen her before. I saw second miss go into the main room to talk and drive other people out of the room. After talking for a while, second miss left. I felt that the old maid was strange, so I deliberately followed her. I didn't expect to see Wang Xingxue. Qing said in disgust. The people in the Piaoyan courtyard really didn't like Wang Xingxue. Wang Xingxue? Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat. She got in touch with him. Yes, it's Wang Xingxue. He hid and talked with the old maid for a long time. Later, Wang Xingxue seemed to leave in anger. Qing reported and finally came to the conclusion, second Mrs. abnormality that day should have something to do with Wang Xingxue. Xiao Wanru nodded. Although Xiao Jing was also very suspicious, in that case, if something happened, Xiao Jing would also be ashamed. Wang Xingxue was indeed the most likely person to do something with Xiao Jia.